21. Dry toilet. At dawn, Stone climbed out of his stone slab bed, stretched, and felt his joints pop. The boss's house finally looked decent. Big Valley had led the Goblins for half a month, laying stone foundations and wooden frames, and they'd managed to build a 2-story structure. The first floor was a large open space with a few rough stone slabs serving as tables, where he, Crooked Mouth, and Big Valley held meetings. The second floor had only one room. Besides his stone bed, there was a wooden chest for coins and maps. It was peaceful. His bed was covered with a wolf hide, one Scarface and the Squigs had killed a few days earlier, and it was furry and far more comfortable than straw. Stone ran his hand over the fur, pleased. Being the boss was great. A private room and a soft bed were 100 times better than cramming into a cave when he first arrived. He slipped on his straw sandals and went downstairs. There were already people on the first floor. Crooked Mouth was squatting by a stone slab, sharpening a stone axe, and Big Valley was picking his teeth with a spear tip. Seeing Stone come down, they quickly stood. "Boss, what are we doing today? Do you want to check the sheep pen? It looked like a ewe might give birth yesterday," Big Valley asked. "Let Skinny Pole keep an eye on the sheep." Stone waved him off and headed for the door. "Today we have something more important. Cleaning." Crooked Mouth and Big Valley exchanged confused looks. Cleaning? Why did the boss care about that? They didn't dare ask and followed him outside. Stone led them to the open area in the corner of the tribe. Before, the greenskins had relieved themselves wherever they pleased, and the place reeked. He'd wanted to fix that for a long time. He had Big Valley call over the dozen or so nimblest Gretchen and told Crooked Mouth to fetch a few thick logs and some stone slabs. He squatted and drew circles on the ground. "Big Valley, put the logs here." Stone pointed at the circles. "Set them deep. Make them sturdy. Gretchen, place the slabs next to them. Arrange them like steps." Though the greenskins didn't know what they were doing, when the boss said to do it, they worked hard. Big Valley swung his axe to dig pits, shoved in the logs, and if one leaned, he kicked it straight. The Squigs carried stone slabs and set them as steps, pushing crooked ones with their claws and sweating as they worked. Stone barked directions, spitting as he spoke. "That log on the left, move it a bit more. Don't block the path. Don't stack the slabs so high, the Gretchen won't be able to climb." He'd remembered how dry toilets looked in the human villages back home, so he copied the design. A wooden frame, stone slab steps, straw to cover the sides, simple and practical. After a morning of effort, they finally had something decent. The frame was propped up, the stone steps were uneven, and the straw covering was haphazard and ugly, but it was better than going anywhere. "Everyone over here," Stone called, hands on his hips. The greenskins who had been watching gathered quickly. Stone pointed at the new structure. "From now on, everyone uses this. If anyone pees or poops anywhere else, I'll punish them by not letting them eat mushrooms for 3 days." The greenskins stared at the wooden frame with blank faces. Crooked Mouth scratched his head. "Boss, how do we use it? Standing or squatting?" "Squatting," Stone glared. "If you don't know, watch others, but nobody's allowed to go outside anymore." As he spoke, a ding sounded in his mind and a system prompt appeared. New blueprint collected, dry toilet, description. Greenskins are usually filthy, but the Blackrock tribe is an exception. After construction, it reduces the tribe's disease infection rate by 15%. Collection reward. Unlocked troop type Peejing laborers, upgraded from ordinary Gretchen, more intelligent and skilled. Each upgrade consumes energy 3. Stone was stunned for a moment, then chuckled. Building a dry toilet unlocked a troop type? Nice. Peejing laborers sounded useful. Better than ordinary Gretchen, handy for building and making weapons later. Big Valley, Crooked Mouth, keep an eye on them and teach everyone how to use the toilet. Stone shouted, then turned and ran toward the shanty area. He had to try out the upgrade function. The 30 Gretchen who had followed him earliest were squatting and twisting straw ropes. Seeing Stone, they stopped and looked up. These Gretchen had been with him from the start. Scarface had been one of them originally, but Stone wanted Scarface to stay as guard captain, so he didn't count him. "Everyone, stand up," Stone ordered. The Gretchen rose, green faces tense, not sure what he wanted. The surrounding greenskins gathered, curious. Stone cleared his throat, imitated a ritual he'd seen, raised both hands and shouted theatrically, "Warboss god of direct fighting and Warboss god of trickery above, make my boys bigger and stronger." Then he silently thought the command, "Upgrade these 30 Gretchen. Confirm consuming energy 90 to upgrade 30 ordinary Gretchen to Peijing laborers?" "Confirm," he answered. 30 beams of green light whooshed out and enveloped the Gretchen. The other greenskins backed away, wide-eyed, hissing in awe. Inside the light, the 30 Gretchen visibly changed. They grew about half a head taller, still shorter than goblins, but no longer like bean sprouts. The confusion in their eyes cleared, replaced by sharper focus. Some brushed straw from their hands without thinking. Their movements became quicker and more confident. When the light faded, the 30 stood looking at each other, then at their own claws. Suddenly they began to howl. "Awoo!" They felt stronger. Their minds felt clearer. Tasks that had seemed clumsy before now felt natural. "Boss, we got stronger," one Gretchen shouted, voice trembling. "Thank you, boss." Others cheered. "Boss is awesome." They crowded toward Stone, half wanting to hug him, half shy. Stone smiled at their new vigor. These Peijing laborers were different, more nimble and useful. He looked at the rest of the tribe. Goblins and Gretchen alike stared with envy, eyes wide and stomachs rumbling, as if gazing at roasted lamb. "What are you looking at?" Stone grinned. "Listen to me. Be clean, work hard, and you can all be like them, bigger and stronger." "Really?" Crooked Mouth was the first to shout, his eyes shining. "Boss, if I use that dry toilet every day, can I get bigger too?" "Yes," Stone patted his chest. "Not just bigger, smarter, able to make bows and arrows, able to move big stones." "Awoo!" The greenskins erupted. "I want to get bigger. I'm going to the dry toilet. Boss, I'm going to bathe right now." Those who'd been disgusted by the dry toilet a moment ago raced to try it. Some Gretchen ran to the river, stripped, and scrubbed themselves until they were covered in suds. Even the laziest Crooked Mouth picked up a straw rope and started twisting it hard, eager to show how industrious he could be. Stone watched the chaotic tribe and laughed. The system really understood greenskins. Play on their desire to grow and they'd fall for it. With Peijing laborers and the fired-up rest of the tribe, building houses and making weapons would surely speed up. "Boss!" Big Valley came over rubbing his hands, face full of expectation. "If I do well, can I become even bigger than an orc? As long as you stay obedient, why not?" Stone patted his shoulder. "First, fix up that dry toilet again. Tighten the straw covering. Don't let the wind blow through." "All right," Big Valley agreed at once, dragging Crooked Mouth toward the toilet. "Crooked Mouth, help me move the straw to the left." Stone stood and watched the 30 Peijing laborers compare heights, then the rest crowding toward the dry toilet, and felt a deep reassurance. Chubby strolled out of the goat pen on his black goat, just as Skinny Pole was crouched by the fence, flicking pebbles at the pheasants. The birds clucked and thrashed, battering themselves against the wood. Skinny Pole cackled, humming a tuneless greenskin ditty, really just shouting "smash dwarfs" and "steal mushrooms" at random. "Quit teasing the birds. Time to feed the goats." Chubby slapped the goat's rump. The black goat bleated and trotted 2 steps forward. He cracked a grass rope that snapped against the ground like a whip and stood there strutting, as if he were an orc boss inspecting his turf. Skinny Pole rose slowly, dusting his backside. "What's the rush? The Peijing laborers are cutting grass. No one's going hungry." He nodded toward a nearby shed where a dozen squats were slicing alfalfa with stone knives, piling the fresh fodder neatly. Ever since Stone had put the 2 of them in charge of livestock, life felt like soaking in mushroom stew, easy and fattening. With a dozen Peijing laborers to cut grass, feed the chickens, and clean pens, all Chubby and Skinny had to do was ride their goats around camp, shout "no slacking" when it suited them, tease birds or talk nonsense, comfort 100 times better than Broken Claw. Chubby slid off his goat and sat, plucking a blade of grass between his teeth. "Honestly, this black goat rides nice." He patted its neck. Stone had picked it out himself, stockier than the rest with a smart charcoal coat. "Only it ain't fast. Wish I had a war boar." "A war boar? Why stop there? Ask for a wyvern." Skinny Pole snorted, sitting beside him. "With what we've got, goats are luxury enough." He had a point. Greenskin mounts came in every flavor. War bosses loved wyverns whose wings could carry them half a day and whose talons tore dwarfs in 2. Goblin riders favored wolves or jungle spiders, wolves for speed, spiders for climbing. Stranger tribes even broke squigs as mounts. Blind and guided by scent, a squig could snap a man's leg in one bite. None of that applied to the Blackrock tribe. They didn't have a single wyvern or warboar, not even a decent wolf, just 30-odd goats docile enough to ride. Yet Chubby and Skinny didn't complain. Perched on black goats, they ambled through camp with chins high. Back in Broken Claw, they'd been beneath the wolf-riding goblins. Now they were goat knights, with pieging laborers at their beck and call. Glorious enough. "Hey, look at those pieging," Skinny Pole said, nodding toward a few newly promoted squats mending fences with far quicker hands than common squats. "Boss is a genius, made the little runts sharp." Chubby glanced over but kept silent, only curling the grass stem in his mouth. He still found it unreal. They actually bowed to a squat as boss. In the old days, squats had been punching bags. Orcs kicked them when bored. Goblins teased them for fun. All they did was haul trash and rocks. Stone was different. The squat could fight, build houses, make statues glow and grow huge, even train other squats to act like goblins. Downright uncanny. "Still, we owe the boss for this cushy life," Skinny Pole sighed. 2 years back, who'd believe it? At that, both goblins fell quiet. Memories from 2 years earlier were like buried mushrooms, mostly left alone, but dig them up and they tasted bitter. Back then, they'd crawled out of the ground half-grown, bottom feeders in the Broken Claw tribe. Broken Claw was a big camp, hundreds of greenskins, with dozens of hulking orcs whose punch could leave a goblin bedridden for days. Without an orc's bulk or an old goblin's cunning, those elders would slip sand into an orc's stew or steal weapons on the sly. The two only knew to shout with reckless bravado and take the beatings that followed. Once Chubby tried to snatch a half-gnawed goat leg from an orc and got a boot in the gut that left him gasping on the ground for ages. Skinny Pole had it worse. He fought another goblin over the mushroom field and ended up with a broken arm, howling while nobody cared. They cowered in hut corners every day, terrified an orc might notice them, living like rats in the street. Even the squigs sometimes pelted them with pebbles. Then the pointy ears arrived. Those fair-skinned elves with arrows that never miss stormed the forest and clashed with the Broken Claw tribe. Elven shafts outclassed greenskin stone spears. One arrow could punch through an orc's throat. The Broken Claw chieftain lasted barely 2 days before he was shot, and the tribe scattered. The two of them ran into the woods with a handful of goblins, got separated from the others, and were finally found half-starved by Stone's lot. They expected to be killed, but Stone not only spared them, he put them to work and later handed them the poultry sheds. Life suddenly looked bright. "Ain't that the truth?" Chubby muttered, spitting out the stalk. His voice was flat. "Back in Broken Claw, we never dreamed of riding goats. Daily mushrooms were already a feast. Now, mushroom soup every day, roast goat every few days, the odd boiled egg, squigs at their beck and call to bully as they pleased. He just steered his goat to ram a tiny squig twining rope. The kid scrambled up, bowing and too scared to even fart. Bliss. Speaking of which, the boss walloped Crooked Mouth again yesterday," Skinny Pole snickered. "He took a dump where he pleased, so the boss chased him halfway across the tribe. Nearly split my gut watching that coward run." "Serves him right," Chubby laughed. "Boss says stay clean to grow big, but he wouldn't listen. Deserved the beating." They'd both taken Stone's miracle to heart. Keep clean, and the walk god smiled. You grew big and strong. Who wouldn't want that? They visited Stone's outhouse daily, washed faces in the river, and smelled less foul. A commotion rose from the lumber yard. Stone was back with Big Valley, and the rest, several of them lugging thick logs. Chubby and Skinny jumped up, dusting themselves. They had to look keen before the boss. "Boss!" they chorused, straightening. Stone glanced at them, then at the goat pen. "Fed the goats? Don't let 'em starve." Fed, Skinny Pole nodded, pointing at the haystack. "The squigs just cut fresh grass, still juicy." Stone grunted and led the crew toward the quarry without another word. Once he was gone, Chubby breathed out and climbed back onto his black goat. "Let's check the coop, see if any hens laid." They ambled toward the valley corner fence, warm sun on their backs, goat hooves clopping, the perfect kind of comfort. "Truth is, the boss may be a squat, but he's bloody awesome," Skinny Pole said suddenly. Chubby didn't argue. He slapped his goat's neck to pick up speed. Damn right, our boss was chosen by the Wog gods. How could he not be? From the bottom of their hearts, they revered Stone. What was greenskin life for, if not the thrill? Fights to pick, meat to eat, folk to bully, strength to gain. Stone had given them the lot. The misery of Broken Claw felt like a wrong-grown mushroom. Pluck it and forget it. This, riding goats at leisure, teasing hens, bullying tiny squigs, chatting with Skinny Pole, this was living. The two goblins circled the tribe on their black goats, humming tuneless ditties as their shadows stretched long in the sun. Just another day in the Black Rock tribe, full of promise. 20th Wolf. The autumn wind swept dead leaves through the valley entrance, making the skulls in the mouths of the Gorkenmork statues rattle like they were howling. The forest had long since lost its summer noise. Most of the leaves were gone, branches jutted bare into the sky, and the grass underfoot had turned yellow and brittle, snapping with every step. Even the birds were scarce. Only the whoosh of wind through the treetops remained, thin and eerie. Inside the Black Rock tribe, it was warm. Stone had ordered the greenskins to start stockpiling early, and the granary, a large shed, was piled high. The Gretchen were stringing uneaten fish on branches to smoke over the fire until blackened. The big mushrooms from the field were boiled into stew, while the small ones were dried and stacked in sacks, hard enough to clack when tapped. More than 30 goats in the pen were lively on dried mushrooms and cut hay, fat and strong, newborn kids bleeding under their mothers. The wild hens in the coop were laying steadily, 5 or 6 eggs a day, saved for hatching, making the greenskins drool but not daring to steal. "We won't starve this winter," Stone said, grinning as he looked at the granary from the second-floor window of the chief's house. He stood shirtless, his green skin gleaming, muscles much more defined than when he first transmigrated, thanks to daily exercise. In his hands were 2 fist-sized stones. He was doing push-ups on a stone bed. The stones thumped against the wooden planks, making the frame shudder. His arms bulged, and he exhaled each time he pressed down. 98, he counted through gritted teeth, sweat trickling down to the wolf fur coverlet and darkening a small patch. Being chief meant acting like one. Greenskin law was simple. Whoever fought best led. If some fool challenged and beat him, Stone would have to give up the chief's spot. Earlier, he'd kept order by claiming to be Gork and Mork's chosen, but now his physique had to match. If a goblin landed a single punch and knocked him down, he'd lose face. 99. He was pushing down hard when shouts rang out from outside, sharp ow-ow cries, and the thud of stone spears against wood. The counting stopped. Stone pushed himself up, tossed a rag over his shoulders, and rushed downstairs barefoot. The stair planks thumped under his feet. By the ground floor meeting slab, Crooked Mouth was swinging a stone axe. Seeing Stone appear, he blurted, "Chief, quick! Something's out there." "What's wrong?" Stone demanded, kicking at him. "Wolves. Lots of wolves." Crooked Mouth's face was pale. He pointed to the valley mouth. "They're outside the fence, packed together." Stone's stomach dropped. He dashed outside. Dusk had come, and long shadows stretched across the tribe. All the greenskins were huddled by the fence. Gretchen burrowed behind goblins who held up stone spears, eyes wide, hissing and pointing outward. "Move." Stone shoved through the crowd to the fence and peered between the stakes. A ring of wild wolves had gathered, 30, maybe 40 of them, each the size of a small calf, gray-furred and filthy, ribs showing. Their eyes glowed a sickly green in the dim light. Tails hung low. They growled low in their throats, while their front paws dug at the earth, sending clods flying. Some lunged at the fence, claws scoring the wood and leaving pale marks. Behind the pack, half a head taller than the rest, sat a large black wolf on a small mound. A diagonal scar ran from its eye to the corner of its mouth. It didn't come forward. It crouched about 10 paces from the fence, green eyes fixed on Stone with a calculating look, like a wolf pup that had learned to think. "These beasts are starved," Stone thought. Food in the forest dries up after autumn, and most animals head south. These wolves had found nothing, smelled the goats and meat inside the tribe, and had decided to wait. "Chief, should we shoot?" Big Valley stepped up with a bow, an arrow fletched with wild hen feathers and tipped with sharpened iron. "I can take that black one's head off with one shot." "Don't be hasty," Stone said, holding up a hand. He swept his gaze over his men. 15 goblins stood ready, 5 with bows holding about 10 arrows each, the other 10 gripping stone spears. Nearly 90 Gretchen cowered behind them, clutching sharpened sticks. Against 40 wolves, and with the fence as a barrier, panic wasn't necessary. "Listen up," Stone shouted, voice cutting over the wolves' low growls. "Goblins, archers to the front of the fence. Aim true, don't waste arrows. Spearmen, guard the gaps. If a wolf scratches, stab it. Gretchen, fetch firewood. Make torches. Scare them off." "Ow, ow," the tribe answered. The Gretchen scurried to pile dry wood by the fence. The goblin archers took cover behind posts, bows drawn and arrowheads glinting at the pack. The spearmen pushed their spears through the gaps, points aimed at wolf eyes. They all waited on Stone's command. Crooked Mouth shoved a pine resin-soaked stick into the woodpile. The pile spit and whooshed into flame, licking upward with a crackle. The greenskins bound burning wood to long poles and held up more than 30 torches. Red light painted the wolves and cast long, distorted shapes on the ground. Wolves hate fire. They took 2 steps back, and their growls got higher, but they wouldn't rush forward. A few bolder ones were winged by arrows. One yelped when its ear was grazed and knocked other wolves over as it scrambled. Crooked Mouth laughed and jabbed his torch outward, singeing a wolf's tail. The animal yelped and tucked its tail, scuttling back. Stone didn't laugh. He kept his eyes on the black wolf. While the others scurried from the flames, that one remained crouched, watching the torches and the greenskins as if planning. "This one isn't ordinary," Stone murmured. A normal wolf would have fled at the sight of fire. This one stayed, watched, and thought about how to break the fence. "Archers, aim at the black one. Don't kill it, only wound its front leg. Teach it a lesson." "Got it," Big Valley notched, aimed at the black wolf's foreleg, and let the arrow fly. It whistled and struck the dirt beside the wolf's front paw. The black wolf shot to its feet, fixing Big Valley with a fierce stare and letting out a low, harsh "ah-woo." The pack edged forward, eyes locked on the fence, ready to pounce. "Come then, beasts!" The greenskins bellowed, spears and torches raised. Even the trembling Gretchen added their squeaking voices to the tumult. For a long moment, the black wolf stared at the fence, then glanced at the torches and the archers' bows, and suddenly backed 2 steps before giving a sharp cry to its pack. The other wolves seemed to understand and retreated about 20 paces, squatting and watching instead of charging. "Why didn't they press it?" Crooked Mouth scratched his head. "Are they scared?" "They're thinking," Stone said, frowning. The black wolf's behavior told him it didn't intend to leave. With no food in the forest and the tribe's goats and chickens so close, it might wait until dark for a surprise attack. "Don't relax," Stone warned. "Hold the torches higher. Archers, keep watching. If anyone slacks, no smoked fish tonight." "Yes, Chief," the greenskins cried, raising torches until their arms shook. The archers reloaded and stared without blinking. Dusk deepened. The horizon turned from yellow to red and finally black. The torches burned bright, casting the wolves' shapes like ghosts on the ground. Stone leaned against a post, grip white on his spear. He felt the calm that comes before battle. If the wolves charged, they'd defend the flock. If they could go out and beat the wolves, he thought with a flash of eagerness, that would be better than push-ups. The goblin's eyes glittered with the same hunger for a fight. The Gretchen trembled, but stood their ground. "If they charge," Stone murmured to his men, "archers take down the alpha first. The rest follow me out and give them a good thrashing. Let any beast who tries to steal from the greenskins learn the price." "Ow, ow! Beat wolves, eat wolf meat." The tribe roared back. The black wolf answered with another long cry, green eyes glinting in the dark as it watched Stone. A tough night loomed ahead. Stone tightened his hand on the spear and felt ready. With his body, his people, and Gork and Mork watching, who was there to fear? The sky was pitch dark, the moon choked by heavy clouds. Only the torches along the tribe's palisade burned, crackling and casting a ruddy glow into the night. The wolf pack outside was restless, front paws scraping at the dirt, low growls rumbling from their throats, tails stiff as sticks. They had crouched there for nearly 2 hours, stomachs growling, the green shine in their eyes growing keener as they stared at the greenskins behind the fence and the distant sheep pen, eager to pounce. Shito stood at the front of the palisade, 2 stone axes in hand, their blades flashing in the torchlight. Dagu had specially sharpened those axes with iron salvaged from the wreck of a merchant caravan. They bit through wood like knives through tofu. Shitu was bare-chested, sweat dripping down his ribs, but he didn't relax. He knew the wolves were testing them, waiting for the greenskins to tire before attacking. "Snap out of it, all of you!" He bellowed over his shoulder. The grots behind him lifted their torches. Their little faces were blackened by smoke. A few who had dozed off jerked up, nearly dropping their torches. Startled by Shito's roar, they straightened, squeaking and brandishing their flames. 5 grots, archers, sat on the wooden platform built for target practice. It stood a half-head taller than the palisade, perfect for shooting down on intruders. Their bows were half-drawn, arrows aimed at the wolves, eyes fixed and unblinking. 10 spearmen guarded the gaps between stakes, stone-tipped spears poking through, points leveled at the wolves' faces. Waizui jabbed his spear forward on purpose, nearly skewering a wolf that stretched a paw to scratch the fence. "Boss, when are they going to charge?" Waizui muttered. "If we squat here any longer, my legs are going to go numb." "What's the rush?" Shito snapped, his gaze locked on a black wolf at the back of the pack. "When they come, we'll beat 'em so bad they won't recognize their own mothers." Time dragged like a millstone. The torches burned shorter. The grots had rotated 2 shifts. Outside, the wolves crouched lower, their growls getting louder. A few edged forward, claws scrapping the earth. Then the black wolf rose. It pushed up from the mound, tilted its head to the clouded moon, and let out a long, piercing howl. The sound cut through the night like a blade, pricking the hairs on everyone's neck. "They're coming!" Shito's chest tightened. "Throw the torches, toss 'em into the pack." The grots flung their torches over the palisade. Flaming clubs arced through the air and slammed into the huddled wolves, sparks trailing. The dry cores ignited, singeing gray fur with hissing flames. The pack exploded. Wolves struck by fire leaped and scrambled. The rest panicked. Ordered ranks dissolved into chaotic lunges and retreats. "Now! Shoot!" Shito shouted. The grots on the platform loosed their arrows. 5 shafts hissed downward and found their marks. One struck a wolf square in the neck. It cried, twitched, and went still. Another tore through a foreleg. The crippled beast dragged itself backward, toppling others in the crush. Got one! Dagu called, already knocking another arrow. At the fence, the spearmen were busy. Wolves, surprised by the fire, slammed into the palisade and got their heads stuck between the stakes. Waizui shoved his spear straight into the maw of one. The tip emerged from the back of the skull with a dull, sickening sound. The wolf kicked twice and collapsed. Skinny Pole, Shugan, jammed a spear into another wolf's eye. It howled and staggered away, blinded. There were too many of them, 30, maybe 40 packed together. As the vanguard fell back, the ones behind surged in. A few leaped high, hooked their forepaws over the palisade, and began to clamber inside. "Stop 'em! Don't let 'em climb!" Shito ran along the fence and hacked at a climbing paw with his axe. A chunk of paw flew off and the wolf tumbled, yelping. Still, 3 wolves made it over, crashing into the greenskins with savage howls. One leapt at a torch-bearing grot and knocked him down. 2 laborer grots jabbed it in the eyes with clubs until it staggered, dazed. Another met Waizui's spear and took a half-foot of stone in its belly. Waizui twisted and the beast toppled. The last aimed for the sheep pen, but Shugan chased it down and smashed a spear across its skull. It went out cold. "Well done," Shito shouted, about to praise them, and then a cold gust hit the back of his neck. He spun and saw the black wolf had somehow scrambled over the fence. It barreled straight at him, eyes blazing red, fangs bared. It had gone for the boss. The wolf charged with terrifying speed, paws thudded, fangs glinting at Shito's throat. "Watch out," the greenskins shouted. Shito didn't panic. He gripped his axes. When the wolf lunged, he sidestepped. The beast missed and slammed into the palisade. Before it could recover, Shito surged forward and brought an axe down on its back. The blade sank in. The wolf whirled and snapped at Shito's arm. Shito leaned back and slammed the other axe into the wolf's nose. Blood spouted, and the beast staggered. "Come on, beast," Shito grinned, wolf blood smearing his face. He closed and swung both axes, one hacking at a leg, the other tearing into the back. The black wolf fought viciously, raking bloody lines across his arm, but it couldn't bring him down. For a moment, the greenskins stood stunned, jaws open. Who had ever seen a grot fight a wolf like that? "Stay back! I'll handle this myself!" Shito roared when Waizui lunged forward. Seizing an opening, Shito slipped beneath the wolf and drove his axes upward. With a wet, ripping sound, the beast's belly split and intestines spilled onto the earth. The wolf's howl turned into a whimper, terror replacing fury in its eyes. Shito didn't hesitate. He raised both axes and struck its neck. The head came off, skittering across the dirt, eyes still wide. The body slumped with a dull thud. At the sight of their leader killed, the pack broke. Two raw howls and they turned and fled, vanishing into the black of the forest faster than they had come. They ran. The wolves ran. The grots erupted, waving clubs and whooping. "Boss is awesome! Boss killed the alpha!" Waizui snatched up the wolf's head and tossed it into the air. Cheers rose again. Shito sank to the ground, breath heaving. His arms stung where the claws had raked him. Sweat and blood clung to his skin, but satisfaction warmed him. He gazed at his cheering tribe and grinned. This was the greenskin life. Fights to be fought, victories to be savored. A soft ding sounded in his mind, and a system notification blinked into view. "Congratulations, host. You have completed the hidden mission. Repel the wolf pack attack. Reward, building blueprints at 2. WAG, energy 80. 1. Grot Spearman allows the training of ordinary grots into grot spearmen, mastering basic long spear techniques. Construction materials, wood S10, stones 5, WAG, energies 40. 2. Grot Archer Camp allows the training of ordinary grots into grot archers, mastering basic bow and arrow techniques. Construction materials, wood 12, stone 3, Wa. Shito froze, then laughed outright. So that's how it worked. Drive off wolves and get blueprints. The system knew what he wanted. With a spearman camp and an archer camp, the grots could be trained properly. Next time wolves or another tribe came nosing around, it would be that much easier to crush them. "Boss, you all right?" Dagu came over, worried. "You hurt? I'll fetch herbs." "I'm fine." Shito pushed himself up, tossed his axes onto the dirt, and pointed at the carcasses. "Drag these back. Skin 'em for mats. Roast the meat and eat. Extra rations tonight." Wolf meat. The tribe surged, excited. Some dragged bodies back, others scavenged arrows, and more heaped on firewood. The air filled with renewed energy, the fight's tension gone, replaced with the bustle of victory. Shito stood by a torch and touched the phantom blueprints at his chest. Spearman camp, archer camp. Once built, Black Rock Tribe's strength would jump. He looked toward the dark forest and smiled with the confidence of a boss who just proved himself. Next time anyone, wolf or man, tried to make trouble, they'd learn not to mess with the boss of Black Rock. "Fire's ready. When do we roast the meat?" Waizui held up a skewer with a wolf leg. "Roast it now." Shito laughed. "Whoever makes it taste best gets a wolf bone to chew on." The grots whooped again, their cries mixing with the torch crackle and carrying into the autumn night, louder and brighter than the wolves' howls had been. 25. Migrating green skin. The wind drove sand and grit across the open wastes, tearing the greenies' clamor into bits. The grass had long since browned, crusting dry against the earth and crunching under the marching troops' feet. Here and there, dark, black rocks jutted up like teeth that hadn't fully grown. The columns stretched out long. The front greenies were nearly stepping into the forest's edge, while the stragglers at the rear still dawdled. Over 50 goblins hefted crooked stone spears. Some had rags tied around their waists. Others were bare-chested, their green skins smeared with mud and bits of grass. Close to 100 smaller Gretchen jostled behind them, short legs pumping. Some carried sticks taller than themselves. Others clutched semi-dried mushrooms, constantly pushing and squeaking like a swarm of headless flies. "Hurry up, all of you. Stop dragging your feet," Kez shouted from the front. He was the group's leader, half a head taller than the average goblin, wearing a dusty little pointed hat he'd plucked off a dead human mercenary long ago. The brim had a hole, but he treated it like a treasure. His beast-hide armor was patched and crooked, one shoulder guard missing, but it kept the worst of the wind off him. He gripped a thick wooden stick and kept turning to kick any laggards, making the small ones howl, yet none dared slow down. "Boss, when are we going to get there?" Glenn sidled up to him. Glenn was an old companion Kess had dragged out of the giant wood tribe. a scar along his cheek from a run-in with a wild boar. He licked cracked lips and stared down the dusty horizon where there was nothing but yellowed grass and a gray, choking sky. I'm starving. The dried mushrooms in my pouch went ages ago. Kes spat. His throat felt like leather. What's the rush? Keep walking, and there'll be food. He said it with conviction, but his own chest said otherwise. A single half strip of tough, dried meat, snatched last month, was all he had left. They'd left the giant wood tribe half a month ago. The tribe lay on the fringe of the evil lands, eking out a living from an old forest. Life had been bearable until autumn came early this year. Mushrooms shriveled, prey migrated south, and living space got crowded with greenies. The leader, an orc called Ironhead, only knew how to roar, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" Kes saw the danger. If they stayed, half the tribe would kill each other before winter. He didn't argue with Ironhead. The rule among greenies was blunt. The harder fist ruled. So in the dead of night, Kes had gathered the 50 or so goblins who would follow him and about 100 Gretchen. The Gretchen were usually bullied in the tribe, and the promise of fresh mushrooms made them jump at the chance. Where can't a greenie survive? Kes had thumped his chest. We'll find a new patch of woods, mushrooms and prey, better than rotting here with that idiot Ironhead. The boast felt good then, but the march had been miserable. The wastes offered no shelter. Days burned, nights froze, and food grew scarcer by the hour. The dried mushrooms were long gone. The occasional rabbit the goblins caught barely filled a tooth gap. Every one of them had that wild, hungry look, eyes bright with hunger. Hold on. Kes kicked the Gretchen beside him, who'd been surreptitiously chewing grass. It'll be better once we reach the forest. There'll be mushrooms, rabbits, maybe even goats. At the mention of goats, the whole band stirred. Goat meat, roasted until the skin was crispy and the inside juicy, dripping grease into mouths, far better than dried fungus. The Gretchen stopped squabbling and their tiny legs scuttled faster, whispering, "Goats, roast meat." Kes kept his eyes on the horizon, afraid to lose the way. The evil lands were vast. One wrong turn could mean dying before winter, much less finding trees. Then Glenn grabbed his arm with a shaking voice. "Boss, look, up ahead!" Kes squinted. On the distant rim of the plain, a dark green smudge clung to the yellow waste like a patch, trees. A forest. His chest lit up. A forest? It's a forest. He jabbed the air with his stick. "Hurry! There'll be food in there." "Awoo! Forest! Food!" The greenies exploded. The goblins who'd been listless a moment before cheered and charged, spears waving. The Gretchen squeaked and surged. The column collapsed into chaos. Those at the front ran. Those at the back were shoved. A few tumbled and scrambled up, terrified of being left behind. "Slow down, all of you. Don't push," Kes shouted, equal parts excitement and command. He knew how greenies were. Excitement could lead them right into traps. If they barreled into boars or another tribe, they'd bleed. No one listened. Goblins ran breathless, and the Gretchen seemed to want wings. Kes stopped trying to manage them and ran, his mind on only one thing: reach the forest, find the mushroom patch, and scoop up fistfuls of fresh fungus. Glenn ran harder than anyone, shouting as he went, "I'll find a rabbit! I'll roast it! That rabbit's mine!" Another goblin countered. They crashed toward the trees in a cloud of sand and grit. The noise startled distant birds into flight. Kes ran in the middle, his little hat askew from the wind, but he had no time to fix it. The forest grew closer, its tree silhouettes resolving into crooked limbs. Dampness and the sweet, earthy smell of rot and leaf mold hit him, so much better than the dust of the wastes. "Charge! Get the mushrooms!" someone yelled. "Charge!" came the reply, and the greenies surged to the forest's edge. Under the trees, the ground changed to a soft carpet of rotted leaves. Branches knitted overhead, the wind died away, and the cool, damp air made Kes want to groan with relief. He stopped and looked around. The wood was large, trees gnarled and wrapped in vines, the floor a thick bed of fallen leaves, small mushrooms poking up here and there. Tiny and fresh, yes, but plenty. "Stop, all of you!" Kes yelled again. "Don't scatter! Find mushrooms first. Build shelters." Slowly they obeyed. Some squatted down and sifted through the leaves for fungus, others leaned against trunks to catch their breath, and a few peered curiously into the forest's darker depths. Glenn reached to poke at a beetle on a tree with his spear, but Kes knocked his hand with the stick. "Stop messing. Find food." Glenn jerked back and went to work. He unearthed a fat, white mushroom and shoved it in his mouth, chewing with a muffled cry. Delicious! So fresh! The Gretchen copied him, shoving any mushroom they found into their mouths or tucking some into their clothing. Their little faces were streaked with mud, but they were smiling. Watching them, Kess let out a slow breath. They'd finally arrived. With the forest, there would be mushrooms and prey, food enough to get through winter. He was thinking of sending goblins out to scout for other tribes, larger mushroom fields, and maybe a goat herd when Glenn called out, "Boss, look! What's that?" Kess turned toward the clump of trees Glenn pointed to, expecting to see nothing but trunks and leaf mold. "There's nothing," he said, frowning. "There was a shadow over there in that bush," Glenn stammered. He stepped forward, brushed aside the leaves, peered in. "Huh? It's gone. Maybe I was seeing things." Kess didn't think much of it. Shadows moved in a forest. Birds, rabbits, the flicker of leaves. Forget it. Get to the shelters. Before dark. They busied themselves. No one noticed, at the very back of the column, a small, unobtrusive goblin slow his pace. He was half a head shorter than a regular goblin, hatless, his skin smeared with mud until he looked almost like the smallest Gretchen. When no one paid him any mind, he slipped into a nearby throng of bushes. Leaves scraped his face as he scrambled deeper on hands and feet until he vanished. A few flakes of green skin rubbed off and fell among the dry leaves, but the wind quickly covered them and left no trace. Inside the forest, Kess squatted and bit into a mushroom the size of his palm. Freshness burst through. This migration had been worth it. He looked up at the busy greenies and into the darkened trees beyond. Tomorrow, he'd send a few goblins ahead to scout, to see if other tribes lurked here, if there were larger mushroom fields, and, if he was lucky, whether a herd of goats grazed somewhere in the shaded hollows. 26. Giant Tree Tribe. The autumn sun filtered through gaps in the leaves, throwing dappled shadows over the muddy ground of the Blackrock tribe. Stone squatted in the central clearing, watching several pigeon laborers plaster wet mud over a newly erected wooden frame, the foundation for the goblin spearman camp. The frame was a little crooked and wobbly, but it was solid enough. Once the mud dried, it wouldn't shake even in the wind. "Thicker on the left. Don't let the wind in," he barked. The laborers responded at once, scooping up mud with their claws and spreading it evenly. Their movements were faster and neater than ordinary Gretchen. Lately, Stone's mind had been all about the camps. He'd gotten 2 blueprints the day they drove off the wolf pack. A goblin spearman camp and a goblin archer camp. He'd put Big Valley in charge of construction right away. The spearman camp needed 10 logs and 5 pieces of stone. The archer camp required even more wood, 12 logs. The lumberyard had been working non-stop for 3 days just to gather the materials. "Once these 2 camps are up, we'll have proper soldiers," Stone mused, rubbing his chin. Only 5 goblins in the tribe could handle bows and arrows. The rest barely managed a stone-tipped spear. In a real fight, they relied on brute force. If he could train a few dozen spearmen and archers and outfit them with some iron gear, they'd be far tougher, whether hunting boar or fighting other tribes. A commotion from near the fence interrupted his thoughts. "Awu, awoo," calls mixed with the high-pitched squeak-squeak of Gretchen. Stone frowned. Who was making noise at this hour? He rose and walked toward the fence. Rounding the corner of the old goblin's hut, he found Scarface holding a goblin by the scruff and pinning him to the ground. The captive was small and scrawny, his green skin smeared with mud and dead leaves, hair tangled into a mess, a ragged cloth around his waist. He clutched half a chewed dried mushroom and struggled, producing muffled cries. 4 Gretchen stood behind Scarface with sharpened wooden sticks, looking proud. They had just caught him. "What's going on?" Stone walked over and kicked the captive's leg. At the sight of Stone, Scarface let go, stepped aside, made 2 sharp squeak-squeak sounds, and pointed toward the forest. This goblin had been caught out there. Stone crouched and stared at the prisoner. He looked unfamiliar, definitely not one of the Blackrock tribe. Stone tapped the goblin's face with his stone axe. "Talk. Where are you from? Why did you run here?" The goblin flinched at the tap and peered up. Seeing that Stone was a greenskin too, bigger than a Gretchen, his fear eased a little, though he kept his head tucked down. I'm a wanderer." "A wanderer?" Stone raised an eyebrow. Greenskins didn't wander alone. They traveled in tribes, or they'd been eaten by beasts long ago. Stone wasn't convinced. He scraped the goblin's neck with the edge of the axe. "Tell the truth, or I'll throw you to the goats as feed." The goblin yelped and quickly blurted out, "Don't! I'll tell the truth. I came with a group of greenskins. We came from the evil lands." "The evil lands?" Stone's heart skipped. That place was a long way off, a desolate stretch where the tribes were fierce. Why would a group come so far? "What's your tribe called? What are you doing here?" he pressed. "Our tribe's the giant wood tribe," the goblin spilled out. "Our leader, Kess, let us out. Winter's coming in the evil lands, and there's no food. We were afraid to fight other tribes, so we left to find a new place to settle. We only came into the forest yesterday." He shrank back, ashamed. I was hungry. The group's dried mushrooms were all gone, so I sneaked out to find something to eat. I didn't expect to be caught by those little ones right after I crawled out." He glared at Scarface, who knocked him on the head with a stick until he fell silent. Stone ignored the squabble and leaned forward, fixing the goblin with a hard stare. "How many are in your group? What gear do they have?" That was the worry that mattered. Another greenskin tribe could be either an opportunity or a threat. The goblin, too frightened to hide anything, hurried to confess. "There's more than 50 goblins, and nearly 100 Gretchen." Stone felt his stomach drop. More than 50 goblins and almost 100 Gretchen, that outnumbered the Blackrock tribe. His frown deepened. "Is that all?" "There's more. They have iron gear," the captive added fast. "Leader Kez brought some old goblins with iron spears. 2 goblins even have iron axes. They picked them up in the evil lands." "Iron weapons?" Stone's face went dark. Aside from a few arrowheads with iron fragments, Blackrock had no real iron spears or axes. Not only did this group outnumber them, they were better equipped. Stone paced a few steps. If a fight broke out, the Blackrock tribe couldn't hold, even behind their fence. A night raid could finish them. Scarface, seeing him brood, kept silent and held the captive tight. Stone thought hard. The giant wood tribe had come to settle. They'd been in the forest only a day. With almost 100 Gretchen, they must be moving slowly. Kess was probably still sending scouts out and wouldn't know a small tribe already lived here. That meant the giant wood tribe was exposed and unprepared, while the Blackrock tribe was hidden. Relief washed through Stone. If the newcomers didn't yet know they were here, there was time to prepare. Finish the spearmen and archer camps, train the goblins, get some iron gear, and set outposts of squigs to watch the forest. They could even scout and rob the giant wood tribe first, steal some iron, and take in their Gretchen to strengthen Blackrock. The idea warmed him. He planned to call Crooked Mouth, Big Valley, and the others tonight for a meeting. If they moved fast, they might turn this threat into advantage. His steps lightened as he headed for the shacks. "Boss, what's wrong?" Scarface asked, puzzled by Stone's sudden change of expression. He made 2 questioning squeak-squeak sounds. "Nothing," Stone said, clapping Scarface on the shoulder. He glanced at the captive, too much valuable information to let him go. He kicked the goblin's backside. "Get up. Come with me. Behave and you might get some mushroom soup. Try any tricks, and I'll skin you and hang you on the fence." The goblin nodded frantically. "I'll behave. I will." He scrambled to his feet, keeping his head down. Stone led them toward the shack area, his plan already forming. First, lock the goblin up, post a Gretchen to watch him. Have Big Valley and the others speed up the camps. Tonight, they'd decide how to deal with the giant wood tribe. Over 50 goblins and iron weapons were a worry, but with quick preparation, they could either repel them or take what they needed. He glanced back toward the forest. Sunlight through the leaves looked warm, but dangers hid in those shadows. That didn't matter. Greenskins lived with danger. It was how they lived. Whether facing soldiers with generals or nature with floods, Stone felt he would not be cowed by some goblin named Kess. "Wait," he called, turning back to Scarface. "Have a few Gretchen keep watch along the forest edge. If they see any greenskins coming, they must report immediately." Scarface nodded and made his squeaky sounds as he ran to the fence, apparently to scout himself. Stone watched him go, smiled at the timid captive, and felt a rush of excitement. Life couldn't be too peaceful. If it was, you weren't living like a greenskin at all. The autumn wind rustled the reeds, shaking dew from the blades until it rolled down and dampened Shito's trouser legs. He crouched among the half-man-high grass, his green skin nearly blending with the foliage. Only his eyes shone bright in the shadow, fixed on the small riverside a short distance away. 5 goblins were hauling stones up the bank. They wore dusty, ragged clothes. Some had crude stone axes at their belts. The others gripped iron spears, the spear tips glinting coldly, clearly true iron, far better than the sharpened wooden sticks the Blackrock tribe used. A dozen or so squigs trudged behind, hauling small stone slabs in pairs. Their short legs churned madly. They tripped over roots and stones, and the goblins cursed at them. "Clumsy fools," Shito muttered inwardly, a smile tugging at his mouth. Behind him, 8 of the tribe's toughest fighters crouched ready. Crooked Mouth, with a stone spear still stained with old blood, Skinny Pole holding a thick wooden club with wide, round eyes, and Big Valley cradling a honed stone axe, breathing as quietly as he could for fear of alerting those by the river. This was a small crew from the giant wood tribe, here to move stones. After catching a wandering goblin 3 days ago, Shito had learned the giant wood tribe's strength, over 50 goblins, nearly 100 Gretchen, and even iron weapons. He dared not go head-to-head, so he'd had Scarface lead the squigs on runs through the forest to map the enemy's patrols. Kez, their leader, was no fool. He organized several small teams: mushroom pickers, logging crews, stone movers, and specifically scouting squads. Their groups were tiny, 3 to 5 at minimum, 7 or 8 at most. That was the opening Shito had been waiting for. "Listen up," Shito whispered, tapping the ground with his stone axe. "Don't make a sound. Wait for my signal, then charge. Beat the goblins first, tie up the Gretchen. Anyone who hollers goes back to camp without meat." The goblins behind him nodded quickly. Crooked Mouth pressed his lips tight to choke back the "awoo" that wanted to burst out. Greenskins might be fierce, but threatened with no meat, they could stay quiet. By the river, the crew was nearly done. The leader spat, flexing numb arms. "That's enough to build a shack. Let's go." They shouldered the stones and, unhurried, headed into the forest, completely unaware of the danger. In their minds, the woods held only rabbits, pheasants, and skittish small beasts. Other greenskins? Where would they come from? A few steps from the reeds, Shito sprang up, pointed his axe, and roared, "Charge! Awoo!" The ambush erupted. Crooked Mouth lunged fastest, driving his spear into the lead goblin's thigh. The spear sank with a wet sound. The goblin shrieked and dropped his stone, crushing his own foot. Skinny Pole swung his club and laid one goblin out cold. Big Valley brought his axe down on an arm. Bones didn't break, but pain doubled the goblin over, and his iron spear clattered free. The river crew never even knew what hit them. 2 tried to fight back, raising stone axes at Crooked Mouth, but Shito delivered a sidekick to one's waist and sent him into a tree. His axe flew away. The squigs, terrified, dropped their slabs and tried to flee. How could their little legs outrun goblins? Crooked Mouth spun and jabbed a spear into a Gretchen's rump. The squirt squealed and collapsed. The rest squatted, covering their heads, trembling. The whole thing was over in the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. 5 goblins lay beaten and blackened, some bound, some pinned. The dozen or so Gretchen crouched in a circle, too frightened to look up. "Search them. Take everything," Shito barked. The goblins swarmed the captives and confiscated every weapon, down to a half-dried mushroom hidden by a Gretchen. "Boss, look!" Crooked Mouth ran over with a small cloth bag that jingled. Shito opened it. Over a dozen copper coins and 2 rusty iron fragments. The giant wood tribe was richer than Blackrock then. He tucked the bag into his tunic and looked at the prisoners, smiling. This was the 5th small team they'd taken. On day 1, they'd ambushed mushroom pickers near the fields, 3 goblins and 8 Gretchen bound and brought back, and a sack of fresh mushrooms taken. On the 2nd day, they'd cornered a logging crew by the yard, 5 goblins and 12 Gretchen. They stole the cut wood and beat the goblin with an iron axe until he cried for his mother. Yesterday, they'd set tripwires on a scouting path. 7 goblins and 5 Gretchen were sent sprawling, disoriented, then rushed and thoroughly beaten, their map stolen even if Shito couldn't read it. That was the point. Don't fight an enemy with superior numbers head-on. Pick off the small groups and wear them down. Shito remembered seeing the tactic in gangster movies in his previous life, and it fit perfectly. Though over 50 goblins belonged to the giant wood tribe, picked apart like this, fewer than 30 might remain. "Drag them back," Shito said, waving. "Lock up the goblins. Hand the Gretchen to Scarface for training. Disobey, and you'll be beaten." "Got it," the goblins answered, hauling the prisoners toward the tribe. The bound goblins whimpered. The Gretchen, cowed, didn't resist, only casting tiny, terrified glances at Shito. As they walked, Shito ran numbers in his head. The giant wood tribe's fighting strength had been hollowed out. The ones left were likely old, sick, or Kess's inner circle. Even if the tribe noticed and sought revenge, they might not have the numbers. More important, they'd seized iron weapons, now 8 iron spears and 3 iron axes. Combined with iron fragments scavenged from the ruined merchant caravan earlier, it would be enough to outfit a small squad. Once they built a spearman camp and an archer camp, Blackrock's power would grow fast. "Boss, that was brilliant," Big Valley said, admiration plain on his face. "No head-on fights, but we still beat them and stole their gear." "That's brains," Shito tapped his head. "Greenskins need more than muscle. If we don't use our heads, we're no better than the ones who just shout and charge." Big Valley nodded, half understanding, his respect deepening. The boss wasn't just a fighter, he could think. He was truly chosen by Gork and Mork. Sunlight filtered through the leaves and threw long shadows as they neared the tribe. The bound goblins were quieted with a few kicks. The squigs kept their heads down, legs pumping, terrified of being left behind. Shito walked at the front, confident. The giant wood tribe would be dealt with soon. Once they were finished, the forest would be Blackrock territory. They could expand the mushroom fields, raise more goats and pheasants, maybe even build a blacksmith to forge iron weapons of their own. He glanced back at the prisoners being dragged behind him and then into the depth of the forest. Kess, he probably had no idea his crews were being wiped out one by one. In the world of greenskins, strength wasn't just numbers. Those who could fight and, more importantly, use their heads survived longer and had more fun. Shito grinned and strode on. 28. Night Raid on the Giant Wood Tribe. Darkness sat over the forest like indelible ink. The Giant Wood Tribe's temporary camp lay in a relatively flat clearing. 24 shacks were huddled together in a chaotic cluster, built from rough timber and thatch. They creaked and groaned in the wind, as if ready to collapse. A few bonfires smoldered outside, embers drifting up listlessly and casting only a weak circle of light. Kez was in the largest shack. He'd had the goblins build it for him. It was half a head taller than the others, and a broken spear stuck in the ground outside the entrance served as a chieftain's sign. He leaned against a wooden post, turning a polished piece of iron over in his hand, something he'd brought back from the evil lands. Outside, the greenskins goofed around. 3 goblins wrestled with a crooked tree using stone axes. The axes landed with cracking force but didn't break the wood, only numbing the arms of the choppers. A dozen Gretchens squatted by a dying fire, fighting and squeaking over a charred rabbit leg. Somewhere, another goblin was laboriously scooping pumpkin pulp with a stone knife and dropping pieces everywhere. Kess frowned and counted on his fingers, 3 chopping wood, 11 fighting for the rabbit leg, 1 at the pumpkin, and 5 dozing in the shack. 20 goblins in all. The Gretchen had thinned from nearly 100 to maybe 30, all scrawny. He rubbed his stubble and muttered, "They didn't run off to steal mushrooms and get eaten by forest beasts, did they?" A few days earlier, he had sent out small teams, the mushroom pickers, the stone haulers, the scouts, and none had returned. At first, he assumed greenskin lads had just found something fun and disappeared. Now the shortage was glaring. He threw the iron piece onto the ground and, with a sudden puff of self-satisfaction, shrugged it off. He was the boss now. Back in the giant wood tribe, he'd been a little goblin pushed around by orcs. Now he commanded lads. He could sleep when he liked and beat whoever he pleased. If the missing ones had been useless and got eaten by beasts, so be it. There were always more greenskins to take. He yawned, drool at the corner of his mouth, and the noises outside seemed like a lullaby. He flopped onto the straw, curled up, and soon snored, loud enough to outcompete the Gretchen's squabbling. Outside the camp, hidden pairs of eyes gleamed from the darkness. The greenskins of the Blackrock tribe had long ago crept close. Shito crouched in the grass at the front, clutching two stone axes still streaked with blood from a daytime ambush. Behind him stood 15 goblins armed for the raid, Crooked Mouth with an iron spear, Big Valley fingering his stone axe, Skinny Pole with a bow and a quiver of a dozen arrows fletched with pheasant feathers. Nearly 90 Gretchen pressed back in the shadows, each holding a sharpened wooden club. Their legs trembled, but their eyes burned with excitement. Time for a fight. Time to plunder. Shut up! Anyone who makes a sound doesn't get meat, Shito hissed, tapping the ground with his axe. While they crept in, Scarface and the Peejing laborers had silently taken care of the two sentries. One was dragged into the grass gagged, the other clubbed unconscious without a peep. The Giant Wood tribe camp lay exposed and undefended. The greenskins inside the shacks snored. Bonfires had almost died to embers, and there was no fence, probably because the camp thought no one in the forest would dare bother with them. Shito looked up. The moon had climbed overhead, silver light pouring down and stretching the trees' shadows. He touched the animal hide wrapped around his head. He'd ordered his lads to wrap hides so they wouldn't get overexcited and start striking their own. Now! He sprang onto a rock, and the moon turned his green skin to silver. The stone axes flashed. Attack! Plunder everything! Crush them! He roared, voice exploding like thunder. Awow! Awow! The Blackrock greenskins burst forward. Goblins surged, weapons raised, and the squigs squeaked and bunched behind them. They came like a dark tide. Thump, thump, thump. Their footfalls shook the earth. The squigs' clubs pat-patted the ground, making a racket that drowned out the camp's snoring. Chaos erupted. Greenskins tumbled out of shacks in a daze. Some were speared before they could open their eyes. The goblin who'd been digging pumpkins stood, clutching half a gourd, when Crooked Mouth drove a spear into his belly. The pumpkin tumbled away as he cried out. The squigs clung to each other and fled for cover, only to be met by Peejing laborers. A club crashed down on a leading Gretchen, and he collapsed, the others cowering and covering their heads. 3 goblins chopping wood raised axes to fight. Then a dark mass of raiders hit them. Iron spears, stone axes, animal hides wrapped heads, 10 times fiercer than usual. As one chopper raised an axe, Big Valley struck his arm. Bone aching, the arm gave way, and the axe clattered out of his hand. The camp dissolved into pandemonium. Some creatures crouched, uncertain whether to fight or beg. Some tried to run and were set upon by squigs clubbing them until they fell. Confused greenskins hit their own companions, mistaking them for enemies. The Blackrock raiders, with hides over their heads to tell friend from foe, systematically cut down their rivals. Goblins stabbed and speared. Squigs swarmed lone targets, tripping and battering legs and backs. Beat them! Steal their iron! Shito bellowed as he charged toward the largest shack where he guessed the chieftain slept. Inside, Kess was jolted awake by screams and noise and sat up. Before he could react, a greenskin bearing 2 stone axes burst in, animal hide wrapped around his head and eyes flashing. Who the hell are you? How dare you break into my shack? Kess snarled, scrambling for his iron spear, the most prized thing he owned, the tip real iron, the weapon he'd once used to beat an old goblin in the Evil Lands. Shito spoke no words. He advanced. To a greenskin chieftain, a fist is the proper greeting. Kess thrust the iron spear. It whistled toward Shito's chest, missed, and thunked into a post. Damn it, Kess cursed and swung. He was taller and had thicker arms. His fist sliced through the air toward Shito's face. Shito leaned back and raised a stone axe. His blade grazed Kess's arm, sending wood chips flying. The two fell into a cramped, brutal brawl. Dry straw scattered, posts creaked, and the thatch roof began to tear. Sweat streamed down Kess's face as he thundered insults and blows. Shito, smaller but slippery, dodged and struck. Kess landed almost nothing. When Kess raised a leg to kick, Shito shot forward, grabbed the leg, and swept him out from under. Kess hit the ground hard. His skull slammed a wooden post and stars danced in his vision. Seizing the chance, Shito leapt on him. Axe poised. Kess blocked with his arm, then the stone axe smashed into it. Pain ripped through him, but he clawed at Shito's hair and head-butted him down. Blood gushed from Shito's nose. They grappled in the dirt, trading punches and strikes, splinters and thatch raining down. Moonlight poured through a hole in the roof, silvery on sweat and blood. I am Shito of the Black Rock tribe, he snarled, driving his forehead into Kess's face. Kess staggered, his grip loosened. Shito raised his axe and brought it down on Kess's neck. With a dull thwack, blood sprayed. Kess's eyes went wide. His mouth tried to form a sound, but nothing came. His hand fell limp. He stopped moving. Shito crawled free, breathing hard, wiping blood and sweat from his face. He had a gash on his arm, and his legs ached, but he felt the hot thrill of victory. He had won. Outside, the fight had mostly ended. The giant wood tribe's greenskins lay groaning or were bound and herded by squigs. Blackrock raiders held the seized iron spears and axes, howling and dancing, their faces streaked with blood and exhilaration. Shito stepped out into the moonlight, his shadow long on the ground. He raised his blood-smeared axe and shouted to his cheering kin, "Blackrock tribe, we won! Awoo! The boss is awesome! Blackrock is awesome!" Their cheers rattled the forest. Shito grinned at the captives and the spoils scattered at his feet. This was how a greenskin lived, fights to win, plunder to take. He touched the hide on his head and looked down at Kez. Tomorrow, he thought, he'd train the captives properly. The useful ones would be kept for labor. The useless ones would be thrown out as fertilizer. 29. Loyal dog morning light filtered through the leaves, throwing dappled patches across the forest floor. Stone marched the captives back to the tribe. Dry leaves crackled underfoot. The giant wood tribe greenskins were bound at the arms in a crooked line. The goblins hung their heads, and the squigs kept glancing at Stone with terrified eyes. The Blackrock lads carried their looted iron spears and axes, humming off-key war songs, faces smeared with blood and mud, all brimming with the easy pride of victory. "Boss, look at that kid. He dares to glare at me." Crooked Mouth kicked a captive goblin. The goblin yelped but didn't dare look up again. Stone ignored him. His mind kept circling the system message from dealing with Kez last night. After the fight, the system had dinged and displayed, "Congratulations, host, on winning this battle." Battle rank, slightly superior. Rewards, follower title loyal dog, 183 WOG energy, 1 piece of information. Host level up to LV3. Slightly superior? Stone clicked his tongue. He'd wiped out the giant wood tribe and killed their leader. Why only slightly superior? What sort of fight would earn an epic victory? Would he have to take on an orc tribe? Still, the rewards weren't bad. 183 WAF energy would go a long way toward upgrading a batch of pieging laborers, and the loyal dog title sounded useful. Best of all was the single piece of information. 1 week from now, a Chaos Beastman tribe will pass through the Howling Forest, escorting a large treasure. Treasure. Stone stroked his chin, his eyes glinted. He'd found gold in the ruined merchant caravan before, and knew shiny yellow coins were a lot more useful than stone shards. Beastmen weren't pleasant, but treasure made risks worthwhile. He'd have the lads train hard these next few days and reinforce the fences. He didn't want to be taken by surprise. They traveled through the night and didn't reach the Blackrock encampment until the sun was high. Outside the fence, Scarface was on guard with a few Gretchen. Spotting Stone, the little one squeaked and darted over, clutching a wild fruit, offering it as always. "Boss, you're back!" Scarface's voice was hoarse, but bright. Stone patted him. "Take the captives down. Lock the goblins up and hand the squigs to Skinny Pole to train. Beat 'em if they don't listen." "Got it." Scarface scuttled off with the others to haul the prisoners away. The captured giant wood greenskins stared at the Blackrock huts, fences, and penned goats with envy. This tribe looked stronger than their makeshift camp. Stone didn't care. He wanted sleep. After fighting and marching through the night, his bones ached. He dropped onto the stone bed in the boss hut and was out cold under the soft wolf fur. When he woke, the sun was near the horizon and his stomach was growling. He found half a strip of dried meat in his pocket, chewed it, and finally felt steady. "Boss, you're awake?" Crooked Mouth called from outside. "Shall I gather the lads?" Stone thought a moment, then nodded. "Call them. All greenskins to the plaza." He wanted to use the victory to award Scarface the loyal dog title, rewarding a faithful subordinate and intimidating the captives at the same time. Soon the plaza was packed. The tribe's goblins and Gretchen squatted in front. The bound captives from the giant wood tribe were grouped behind. Scarface and a few Gretchen stood guard. Stone climbed the stone platform he used for push-ups, cleared his throat, and boomed, "Listen up! Silence fell. Our Blackrock tribe has clear rules, rewards and punishments. He swept his gaze over them. There's a lad who's been loyal and brave. Gork and Mork are watching. Today I'm giving him a reward. The lad started whispering, guessing which of them. Crooked Mouth nudged Big Valley. Think it's you? You looted 3 spears yesterday. It's you, Big Valley hissed back. Stone pointed to the edge of the plaza. Scarface! Scarface froze, incredulous, then scurried forward. He was half a head shorter than a goblin, a little errand runner and guard. Nothing special. Come here, Stone called. The little Gretchen climbed up and looked at Stone with wide, excited eyes. Scarface was the first to follow me. If I say east, he doesn't go west. If I say strike, he doesn't hesitate. Gork and Mork like loyal lads. I will give him a name. He raised his hand and shouted to the sky. Gork and Mork above. Today I bestow upon Scarface the title Loyal Dog. May he follow me and grow stronger. Stone thought the command. System. Apply the Loyal Dog title. The title Loyal Dog has been granted to follower Scarface. Effect. Follower will grow in step with the host's physical development. A green light descended and wrapped Scarface. The plaza howled in a single delighted, "Awoo!" This was a miracle, the same kind they'd seen when the boss changed before. Under the light, Scarface visibly shifted. He grew taller, inch by inch, until he matched Stone's height. His arms and legs thickened, muscles bulging where they had been thin before. The scar on his face sharpened, making him look tougher. When the light faded, Scarface stood dazed, palms larger, claws sharper. He touched his face in disbelief. I got bigger, he murmured, his voice deeper than before. Yes, you grew bigger. Stone grinned and slapped his shoulder. Stick with me and you'll get even bigger and stronger. Scarface dropped to his knees and kowtowed with a thud. Thank you, boss. Thank you, Gork and Mork. I'll be more obedient and a better fighter. The plaza exploded. Awoo, a miracle. The Blackrock greenskins cheered, raising weapons and chanting praise. Even the captives from the giant wood tribe gaped. If a little Gretchen could become this, maybe following this boss wasn't so terrible after all. Quiet, Stone shouted, and they went still. He looked at the crowd and said, It's not just Scarface. If you listen, work, and fight, whether you're an old lad from here or a new recruit, you can get bigger too, stronger, like Scarface. Awoo! The boss is awesome. The roar shook leaves from the trees. Even the captured greenskins, softer voiced now, echoed the cry, their fear giving way to something like hope. Stone felt reassured. He'd rewarded Scarface and cowed the captives. The tribe had more hands now, and with 183 Wah energy, he could upgrade a group of Peejing laborers and prepare for the Beastmen in a week. He squeezed Scarface's shoulder. Get up. From now on, you'll follow me and be my guard. Yes, boss. Scarface stood tall, chest puffed out, every bit the fighter he'd suddenly become. The sun slid low, stretching long shadows over the plaza. The greenskins kept cheering, and the whole Blackrock tribe bathed in the warm glow of victory and new hope. The late autumn wind carried a chill that made the wooden windows of the Big Valley hut creak. Stone stood on the threshold, shading his eyes with one hand as he looked toward the center of the tribe. It was busier than a market. Big Valley, wearing a ridiculous goatskin hat, crookedly stitched from the hide of a wild wolf he'd skinned last month, its drooping brim covering half his face, darted about, brandishing a thick wooden club. Move that pile of stones in farther. Don't block the path, he barked. Squigs, carry those straight pieces of wood over here. He shouted until his voice was hoarse, occasionally kicking a slow-moving Gretchen and sending the little things squeaking, but they didn't dare slack off. Their short legs scrambled. In the central clearing, the frames for the Goblin Spearman Camp and Archer Camp were already going up. The Spearman Camp was a square wooden shed on bluestone slabs, its posts as thick as bowls, sturdier than a lean-to. The Archer Camp stood beside it with an elevated target platform, its frame crooked but solid. Wood and stone lay scattered, some split into planks, others still rough blocks. Squigs hauled them, while goblins chipped stone with flint axes, the ding-ding-dang-dang of tools mixing with the greenskins' shouts and echoing through the tribe. Big Valley. This one actually has some method to his madness, Stone grinned. Ever since the fight with the giant wood tribe, Blackrock's manpower had swelled. The more than 30 captured goblins had been folded into their numbers, and nearly 100 squigs had been assigned to Scarface. Now, including Stone, the tribe counted 87 goblins and 165 squigs, 10 times livelier than when he'd first arrived. What mattered most to him were those two camps. The system blueprint said the spearman camp could train goblins in long spears, and the archer camp could teach them bows. Goblin spearmen and archers might be low-tier soldiers, less fierce than orcs and not as tough as black orcs, but for Blackrock they would do. Before, the greenskins fought only by brute force, blindly thrusting stone spears. With training, they would at least be less useless in a fight. Once the camps are up, I'll have Crooked Mouth and a few others do the training, Stone mused, rubbing his chin. Crooked Mouth had steady hands, good for archery. Skinny Pole had the strength for a long spear, and Iron Claw, the one who'd surrendered from the giant wood tribe and used iron spears, could be the drill master. Distribute the iron spears and axes captured from the giant wood tribe, and the Blackrock tribe would have a decent force. Something cool drifted from the gray sky and landed on his face. Stone looked up. Snow! Rice grain-sized white specks floated down, melting as they touched the grass. "It's snowing?" he said, momentarily stunned. It had come earlier than last year. Winter was arriving ahead of schedule. His stomach tightened, and he bellowed, "Scarface! Scarface!" A short, squat figure scrambled over from the construction site. Scarface, now the Squig Chief, had his green skin smeared with mud and shavings. He snapped to attention at Stone's call, squeaking for orders. "Don't just stand there." Stone pointed toward the mushroom field to the east. "Get the squigs to grab the burlap and cover the mushroom beds. Heavy snow will freeze the mushrooms." The mushroom field was the tribe's lifeline. Chubby and Skinny Pole tended it, and the caps had been growing white and plump. Dried, they made emergency rations. Fresh, they could be boiled into soup. If the snow froze them, they'd starve in winter. "And," Stone barked on, "go to the goat pen and fetch Chubby and Skinny Pole. Tell them to herd the goats into the sheltered cave. Check the fodder. If there's not enough, use the dried grass we took from the giant wood tribe." There were 56 goats in the pen and 7 lambs born last month, treasures of the tribe. Fodder was scarce in winter. If the herd froze or starved, it would be a heavy loss. "Squeak! Squeak!" Scarface nodded and darted into the mass of squigs, legs pumping as he hollered, "A woo!" He ordered them to stop work. Some hauled burlap toward the mushroom beds, others took dried grass to the goat pen. The chaotic construction site split into 2 surprisingly orderly groups. Stone watched the busy squigs and breathed a short relief, but soon frowned. A few squigs were bungling the burlap shelter, throwing it over the frame, tugging at one corner, and leaving most of it flapping uselessly. At the goat pen, Chubby and Skinny Pole were having trouble. Several nanny goats refused to enter the cave, and the squigs squeaking only spooked them, scattering goats everywhere. "Still not enough people who can manage things," Stone muttered. There were only a few key organizers in the tribe. Big Valley ran the construction, Scarface handled the squigs, Crooked Mouth managed hunting, Chubby and Skinny Pole tended livestock. The rest were too dumb or too newly surrendered to take responsibility. If this had been an experienced tribe, someone would have already covered the mushroom beds and herded the goats without orders. But Blackrock's greenskins were simple. They knew how to work, fight, and steal. Without supervision, everything fell into chaos. Last time he'd sent squigs to cut grass, they'd gone down to the river to catch fish and nearly froze. Another time he'd told goblins to repair a fence, but they found the stones too heavy and used thatch instead, and the wind blew it down. "I need a few more folk who can manage," Stone thought. The snow thickened, no longer rice-sized specks but flakes like goose feathers, drifting down and starting to blanket the grass. The workers kept going. Some dragged stones under temporary shelters. Others piled thatch on beams, breath steaming in the cold. No one dared stop. Big Valley still watched from the doorway. Stone wrapped his animal hide tighter and went inside. It was warmer within, and half a roast lamb from the morning lay on the council stone. He bit into it, thoughtful. Winter was coming, and the tribe's chores would only multiply. He had to guard the granary against rats stealing dried mushrooms, reinforce fences so wolves couldn't ambush in the snow, and teach the greenskins to hunt in cold weather. Stored food alone wouldn't last. "If only there were an orc I could put in charge," he muttered. Orcs, though blunt, were strong and kept order. Unfortunately, Blackrock had only goblins and squigs. Footsteps thumped at the door. Big Valley pushed back the curtain and stepped in, his goatskin hat dusted white. "Stone," he said, rubbing cold red hands together. "The stones and wood are all covered. The squigs are setting up mushroom shelters. Should we let everyone rest a bit?" "Rest my ass!" Stone glared. "Tell the goblins to keep chiseling. The Archer Camp's target platform isn't finished, and don't stand about. Go check the goat pen, and make sure those two idiots don't herd the goats into a ditch." "Right." Big Valley didn't argue, tightened his hat, and ran back out. He slipped on the threshold, drawing squeaks of laughter from the squigs, and glared until they quieted. Stone went to the window and watched the snow. It fell heavier now, cloaking the whole tribe in a wide white. Only the greenskins in the clearing moved, like busy ants. Being Big Valley was no easy thing. He had to fight, yes, but also manage food, shelter, and the daily needs of these greenskin youngsters. If he didn't keep them in line, the Blackrock tribe would have scattered long ago. "When spring comes, I'll build another granary and dig a cellar for meat," Stone vowed, clenching his fists. He was the chosen of Gork and Mork. He had to make Blackrock stronger. It needed more people, rules, stores of food and weapons. Only then could they hold a place in this forest. Only then could they fight, eat meat, and live well. Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside life went on. The squigs' squeaks, the goblins' dinging axes, and the distant baying of goats mixed together, a messy, stubborn energy that warmed the tribe even as winter closed in. Snow had fallen for 3 days, blanketing Howling Forest in white. She too stood at the second-floor window of the chief's house, fingers closing on a crumpled scrap of parchment, the map the system had given him. After a year of poring over it, he finally understood the immediate area. The patch of dark green on the page was labeled Howling Forest. The name alone sounded dangerous. Between high mountains and open plains, the forest was bisected by a winding yellow line. Howling Trail, the only road through the woods wide enough for wagons and horses. Last winter, Shito had followed a caravan's tracks and found the road paved with gravel, bumpy, but passable for large groups. "To the north are the dwarves' halls, and to the south the black Numenorians," he murmured, tracing the map with a calloused finger. The upper left corner showed a smoking citadel marked Gezhik, high mountain dwarf city-state. The lower right corner, a square city flying a black banner, Katushir, black Numenorian city. He had never seen either place. Caravans had told him the dwarves were clever miners and ironworkers, and the black Numenorians fierce archers with darker skin and skills that rivaled elves. We must stay well away from both, he thought. Dwarf axes bite deep, and Numenorian archers could pick off anyone who strayed in the open. Blackrock tribe was still weak. There would be no head-on fights. His real worries were local, whether the mushroom beds in the east would hold out, whether the western sheepfold needed more guards, and the set of iron spears taken from the giant wood tribe that still needed to be sharpened by the Gretchen. A high, anxious squeak cut through his thoughts. Downstairs, Scarface was waving a wooden stick, face white with panic, pointing to the west. Shitu pulled on his animal skin coat and went down. "What's wrong?" "Big Valley. West. Movement." Scarface yanked at Shito's pant leg and began dragging him toward the western outpost. A handful of lookout Gretchen followed, their short legs trembling as they squeaked and pointed into the trees like they'd seen a nightmare. Shito's heart tightened. Wild beasts usually hid during snowstorms. Could it be another greenskin warband? He snatched his stone axe from its corner. "Let's go. We'll see." They ran through ankle-deep snow toward the outpost beneath an old oak. The Gretchen had built a wooden platform there to watch the entrance of Howling Trail. From the platform, Shito looked west and swallowed. A force was moving along the trail. At its head strode several creatures that looked like a cross between wolves and boars, black fur bristling with sharp spines down their backs. Their claws gouged the snow, and they panted, occasionally lowering their heads to gnaw frozen meat. Razor beasts, Shito recognized from the system's monster compendium, extremely vicious. Behind them padded dozens of dog-like animals with mottled fur and red eyes, noses working the air, low throaty growls escaping them. Chaos warhounds, more savage than ordinary wolves, and said to be tainted by chaos. Further back shuffled about 100 hunched figures that were half human, half beast. Short and crooked, horns jutting from their shoulders, some swung stone axes, others gripped sharpened clubs and wrapped themselves in rags against the cold. Ungor, the lowliest of beastmen. In the center strode a dozen larger figures, tougher, an extra head taller than Ungor, thick muscles and straight iron-like horns. Rusty breastplates clanged as they tramped through the snow, spears stained with old blood. These were the Gore Beast, the beastmen's shock troops. Even the Chaos Warhounds kept their distance. Ahead of them all moved a single massive creature, bigger than the Gore Beast, its coat black and matted, horns branching like dead trees. It carried something bloody in its mouth that looked like a human leg, chewing with a wet crunch. Its murky yellow eyes swept the white landscape, alive with hunger and bloodlust. A great horned beast, the leader of the beastmen. Beastmen, Shito breathed. His stomach dropped. Beastmen were people or animals twisted by chaos, ordinary humans living in places saturated with it, slowly growing horns, hooves, fur, and bestial faces until they were something else. Animals could warp in the same way, learning to stand and use rudimentary tools. Cast out from normal life, they gathered in the woods, forming herds and surviving by raiding settlements. They worshipped chaos itself, thinking of it as their progenitor, and attacked any uncorrupted humans they found. In short, chaos turned living things into savage half-beasts that roamed the forests in deadly packs. This force numbered over 200, fortified by Gore Beast and led by that great horned beast. If Blackrock Tribe's handful of people ran into them, their den would be cleaned out. Should we run? Scarface's voice shook as he clung to Shito's arm. Run my ass. Shito glared at him but stepped back quietly. They haven't seen us. Let's go. They slipped down from the platform and crept back to the tribe, keeping low. The trail of footprints they'd left was already being erased by fresh snow. When they arrived, Shito called Crooked Mouth, Big Valley, and Skinny Pole together. Beastmen came from the west, over 200, razor beasts, Gore Beast, and a great horned beast leading them. The goblins erupted. Beastmen? How did they get here? Are they coming for our sheep? Big Valley, hide us in the cave. Hide? Shito slammed his hand down on a stone slab. How long can a cave hide us? If they find us there, they'll just trap us inside. He rubbed his chin and glanced at the map again. They're probably heading for the Black Numenorians in the south. Not long after, a lookout Gretchen came running back with confirmation. The beastmen had turned south, following Howling Trail straight toward Katushir. Shito felt some relief, but he didn't relax. We can't let our guard down, he said. Crooked Mouth, take the archers to the western outpost and keep watch. Report any movement immediately. Big Valley, have the Gretchen reinforce the fence, plug the gaps with stones. Skinny Pole, find every iron spear and axe we've got and distribute them. Scarface, have the Gretchen roast more dried meat. Ready us for a fight. Got it, the goblins scattered. Crooked Mouth ran to the outpost with his bow and arrows. Big Valley ordered the Gretchen to drag stones into the palisade. Skinny Pole dug through the sheds for weapons, and Scarface barked orders at the Gretchen to stoke the fire until racks of mutton sizzled above the flames. Shito stood at the chief's house doorway, watching the western tree line. Snow fell steadily. Howling Trail was a pale ribbon vanishing into the white. Still, he could almost hear heavy footsteps crunching through the drifts and the wet, crunching chew of the great horned beast. Peace was gone. Now that the beastmen had arrived, they would not leave easily. Whether they meant to fight the Black Numenorians or carve out territory in Howling Forest, Blackrock Tribe had to be ready. Shito tightened his grip on his stone axe, a hard light in his green eyes. Beastmen or not, he told himself, we goblins aren't to be trifled with. If they come here, we'll show them the strength of Blackrock Tribe. The wind whistled through the fence like a warning, and inside the tribe fear and excitement mixed. The goblins were terrified, but also eager. A battle was coming. This was the life they were born for. 32. Unexpected dwarfs. Snow pellets stung like tiny stones. Stone crouched behind an old pine, watching the distant column of beastmen shrink, a chewed grass stalk hanging uselessly from his mouth. Boss, are we really not going to attack? Crooked Mouth leaned over, still clutching the iron spear stolen from the giant wood tribe. Its tip glinted cold in the snow. That great horned beast looks fat. If we take him down, we could roast a whole pot of meat." Stone shot him an annoyed look. "Attack? You think you can take on a gore beast? Or that great horned beast one-on-one?" He spat on the snow. The dark spit left a stark mark. "There are over 200 beastmen, dozens of gore beasts. If our handful of people rush them, we won't even be a snack." Crooked Mouth stabbed the spear into the snow and fell silent. The other goblins hung their heads, frustrated. Greenskins lived for fighting and looting. Watching a herd of prey pass by without being able to act was painful. Stone burned with the same suppressed anger. He wanted to smash those beastmen, especially that great horned beast gnawing on a human leg, but he knew the realities. The Blackrock tribe had only just sized up: 87 goblins, 165 Gretchen, 56 goats, and 17 wild chickens. Coming at the beastmen head-on would be suicide. "Greenskins need brains as well as brawn," Stone said, patting Crooked Mouth on the shoulder. "When we've got more people, orc boys, guys who can take down a gore beast, then we'll settle with them. For now, hold it in." Reluctantly, the goblins agreed. Greenskins respected strength. The fighters made the calls. Besides, Stone had the title of God's Chosen of Gork and Mork. Big Valley kicked at a snowdrift and grumbled, "So what do we do now? Just watch them go south?" "Follow them," Stone said, standing and brushing snow from his clothes. "See what they're after. If they go to fight those dark-skinned humans to the south, we might be able to pick up some scraps." That was all it took. Picking up scraps was the perfect plan. Crooked Mouth brightened, slinging the spear over his shoulder. Stone picked Crooked Mouth, Big Valley, and Skinny Pole, the three quickest goblins, and told Scarface to stay behind with two Pyjing laborers to watch the tribe. Then he led the three goblins, moving low as they tailed the beastmen. Walking in the snow was slow. Their trouser legs were soaked in minutes. Calves went numb. Luckily, the column moved slowly. Razor beasts and chaos warhounds stopped to chew ice, and the Ungor were so cold they huddled and rested frequently. That gave Stone and his group the time they needed. After about an hour, a canyon opened ahead, steep slopes on both sides and a path only wide enough for 2 or 3 beastmen abreast. Stone's heart leapt. This was perfect for an ambush. They slipped into the bushes at the canyon mouth and peered out. The beastmen were filing in. The leading great horned beast still gnawed the human leg, periodically raising its head to roar twice and urge the Ungor forward. Razor beasts and chaos warhounds prowled the column's edges, noses to the snow. A long horn blast suddenly echoed from above the canyon. The sound vibrated through the snow and set nerves on edge. The great horned beast froze, the human leg dropping from its mouth with a soft thud. It raised its head, cloudy yellow eyes fixed on the canyon rim, and issued a low, gurgling growl. "It's dwarves!" Stone felt a jolt and looked up. Short, stout figures were clambering the slope, broad-shouldered, some with bushy red beards, all wearing round iron helmets and shining heavy armor. Dark tubes trained down the canyon. One of them, a dwarf with a white beard, bellowed and swung a baton. The great horned beast roared and pawed at the snow. "Prepare for battle! Drag them down!" Ungor raised stone axes and wooden clubs and charged the slopes, howling. Gore beasts moved in, iron armor flashing. Razor beasts and chaos warhounds sprang from the column and leapt up the crevices, steam puffing from their mouths, eyes red with bloodlust. "Fire!" the white-bearded dwarf shouted. "Bang, bang, bang!" A thunder of gunfire answered. Black smoke puffed from the dwarves' tubes as leads spat down the slope. The first Ungor to charge dropped, bodies riddled with holes, convulsing once before going still. Those behind them screamed as bullets shattered limbs and sent them tumbling. Stone's eyelids twitched. These dwarven firearms were devastating, far faster and more accurate than simple bows. If the Blackrock tribe had met them head-on, they'd be finished. Still, the beastmen were relentless. Even after a wave broke, another surged forward. A gore beast took a bullet in the shoulder that punched through iron, yet it roared on, clawing at the slope. It was almost at the top. "Use the axes! Smash them down!" the dwarves shouted. They dropped their tubes and raised axes and warhammers, smashing downward. A dwarf swung an axe at a gore beast's helm and made it stagger. The beast reached down and grabbed the dwarf's leg. The dwarf was pulled off balance, tumbled, and rolled down the slope. "Save him!" the dwarves shouted. True to their nature, they didn't abandon a comrade. They began hurling stones down, and blocks fell like hail, striking beastmen and bringing howls. Still, the Ungor's momentum kept pushing them upward. The canyon became chaos. Gunfire, roars, and screams mixing as blood and bodies littered the snow. Wave after wave of Ungor surged. The dwarves held the slopes with firearms and axes, but their volleys gradually thinned, likely from running low on bullets. When their guns faltered, they fought with hammers and axes, and now and then a dwarf was dragged down while an Ungor tumbled back dead. Stone crouched in the bushes, heart pounding. He finally understood how dwarves could build mountain strongholds. These short fighters were as tough as they were stubborn, and their armor shrugged off claws and teeth. Crooked Mouth whispered, itching to jump in. "Boss, should we help the dwarves?" "Help them?" Stone glared. "Let them fight. When they've battered each other to hell, we'll go pick up the scraps." The goblins exchanged glances and grinned. The boss was right. When the dwarves and beastmen had exhausted themselves, they could rush in, beat what was left, and loot armor and guns. A perfect plan. The battle raged. Though the beastmen took heavy losses, their numbers pressed them upward stubbornly. The dwarves' gunfire slowed as their ammunition dwindled, forcing desperate close combat. Stone tightened his grip on his stone axe, eyes fixed on the slaughter below. He knew the moment to grab the scraps was coming soon. 33. Pincer-attack snowflakes, whipped by the wind, rattled against helmets and hissed across the canyon rim. Facie Redbeard crouched behind the embankment, thick, stubby fingers white around the haft of his warhammer. Snow dusted his famous red beard like frozen thatch. The wrinkles around his eyes gleamed with a furnace-hot intensity as he watched the beastmen massing below. "Why did these bastards have to show up here?" he muttered. His spit froze into tiny pellets as it hit the snow. They didn't want a stand-up fight. The caravan was only 3 li into the woods, laden with iron ore and Gezhik's strong liquor. If the beastmen had surprised them, it would have been his wagons and his lads trapped and butchered in that gorge. He glanced at the men behind him, 53 stout dwarves in gleaming iron, warhammers on their backs and muskets slung at their shoulders. Old companions who had hauled cargo through blizzards and cleared paths with hammer and shot. They could scatter Ungor with a well-placed volley, but there were too many of the enemy. Nearly 100 Ungor flailed like headless flies. A dozen gore beasts in iron armor glinted ominously, and towering over them all stood Kongtu, the great horned beast, chewing on a human leg and looking a head taller than any man. "Dad, can I take a few lads and stick 'em in the rear?" Lee J. Redbeard leaned close. Youth still softened his face. His beard was shorter and fluffier than his father's. He toyed with the copper-studded warhammer Facie had given him for his coming of age. "Please?" Facie shot him a look. "What's the hurry? Did you forget my lessons? A hunter waits for the prey to step into the trap." He pointed down the slope. "You take 12. Circle round the side and hide in the rubble at the bottom. I'll bait them up here. When their backs are exposed, you hit them hard." Lige grinned, flashing white teeth. "Got it. I'll gut their arses." He gathered 12 dwarves, dropped low, and slid into the nearby brush. Thick, short legs ate the snow fast. He vanished, leaving footprints that the falling flakes began to blur. Below, the beastmen hesitated. Kongtu sniffed the air, then pointed his iron axe at the embankment and bellowed. A pack of chaos warhounds dashed down the slope, noses working and low whines trembling from their throats. "Damn, those dogs have noses!" Facie spat, drew a horn from his chest, and blew a long, braying note that rolled through the canyon like an angry bull. "Fire!" The dwarves raised their muskets in unison. Barrels smoked. "Bang! Bang! Bang!" Lead screamed into the herd. The first Ungor to surge forward crumpled in the snow, rags stained crimson and bodies twitching once before going still. A warhound took a ball in the eye, yelped, whirled, and bit the Ungor behind it, turning the mass into chaos. "Ha! Nice shooting!" The dwarves laughed, slapping stocks, their beards shaking. Facie did not smile. He watched the slope, disordered but not broken. Kongtu set his axe into the snow, spray drifting with each heave, then roared, "Kill! Drag the dwarves down, make them meet." A pack of Ungor poured up the embankment, flailing stone axes and clubs. The gore beasts followed, heavy iron clanking, horns smeared with old blood. "Hold! Don't let them reach us," Facie shouted. The dwarves forged into 2 ranks, front row crouched, rear row kneeling, muzzles up. Bang! 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 Another volley carved a red path through the slope. Holes bloomed in the snow like shattered plum blossoms. But the beastmen climbed over their dead and kept coming. Ungor now pressed the top of the incline, spittle foul against the dwarves' helmets. "Switch to hammers," Feishi snapped. Yanking his warhammer free, the runework on the head gleamed in the cold. Muskets clattered as the dwarves dropped them and seized warhammers. Metal on metal rang out like the first notes of a battle hymn. The first to crest the slope was a gore beast, roaring and bringing his axe down. A dwarf rolled aside and swung his hammer at the beast's leg. Clang! The blow glanced off iron. The gore beast countered, denting the dwarf's armor. The dwarf grunted, seized the axe haft with one hand, and chopped with his hammer's edge with the other. Blood spattered his face. The beast's head lolled, and it crashed down. "Well struck," Feishi bellowed, meeting Kongtu as the great horned monster charged. Axes met hammer. Clang! Sparks flew. Feishi was driven back 2 steps, his hands stinging. Kongtu barely budged. He was a mountain of power. "Dwarf, your bones must be brittle." Kongtu snarled, saliva and blood spattering the snow. He came again, the bloody axe aiming for Feishi's skull. Feishi ducked. The blade bit a trench where he'd been standing. He seized the moment to hammer at Kongtu's knee. Beastmen knees were unarmored, and Kongtu howled, dropping to one knee. As Feishi moved in to finish it, an Ungor crashed in from the side and smashed a club into his back. Feishi lurched. Kongtu slashed in a wide sweep. Iron clove his arm, splitting mail and drawing hot blood. "Blast it," Feishi cursed. He didn't back away. 2 steps forward, and he drove his hammer into Kongtu's neck. The blow didn't sever the head, but it opened a guttering wound. A roar from below the canyon split the air. "Dwarves, time to stab some arses." Kongtu whipped his head toward the noise and met a charge. Over a dozen red-bearded dwarves burst from the rubble, Li Gay at their head, hammers raised like a herd of boars. They slammed into the beastmen from the rear. Ungor, who had been surging up, were struck in the small of the back, sent tumbling down the slope in screaming, rolling heaps. A gore beast turned too late, and Li Gay's hammer struck the side of its face. It lost an eye and rolled, howling, in the snow. "Pincer attack! Finish them!" cheered the dwarves on the ridge, spirits lifting. Pressure that had been crushing them gave way. The defense turned into an offense. Kongtu, winded and bloody, touched his neck, and a flicker of fear passed through his eyes. He roared in fury, forced Feishi back with a blow, and bolted out of the canyon. The remaining gore beasts followed. Without their leaders, the Ungor fell into utter chaos. Some fled up the slope, others fled down, and the dwarves cut them down like cabbages. "Don't let the great horned beast escape," Lija shouted, swinging after Kongtu. But Kongtu ran with terrifying speed, snow and uneven ground slowing the pursuers. Li Gay fell behind after only a few steps. Feishi stopped him. "Don't chase a desperate foe," he panted, the wound in his arm still leaking. "See how the lads are." Li Jay glanced back. His eyes burned. Scattered across the top of the slope and in the gorge lay over a dozen dwarves, some motionless, others groaning. The neat formation from moments before was in tatters, armor dark with blood and mud. "Dad, there's no war without loss." Feishi patted his shoulder, voice rough. "Carry the living back to the caravan. The dead, we'll bring them to Gezhik and bury them in the ancestral halls." He looked toward the mouth of the canyon. Kongtu and the gore beasts were gone, leaving only bloody tracks in the snow. "We'll settle this debt with them, sooner or later." The dwarves moved with heavy, methodical grief. Some tended to the wounded, others stripped a fallen comrade of armor and took up his hammer. Each movement was leaden, precise. Snow fell steadily, blotting blood and footprints as if to erase the slaughter. Dwarves of the old world are hard folk of the mountains, relentless fighters and master craftsmen. They forge iron and cast blades, craft runes and runic devices. No skill is beyond them. 2 things they prize above all: face, honor handed down by the elders, recorded in the infamous Book of Grudges, and true ability. Cross a dwarf, defile his property, and he holds that score for eternity. Respect in combat, uncompromised workmanship, these are their creed. Once they were lords of great mountain keeps, but quarrels with elves, earthquakes, and the opportunism of greenskins and Skaven cost them many ancestral halls. They did not fall. What remains they guard with grim tenacity, waging unending war against any who encroach. In short, tough, skilled, proud, and vengeful, fighters of greenskins, skaven, and chaos for generations. Hidden in the distant brush, Shito watched it all. He rubbed the stubble on his chin and whispered to Crooked Mouth beside him, "See that? Dwarves aren't just good with muskets. Their hammers are hard bones, too. Don't go tangling with them on a whim." Crooked Mouth swallowed and watched the dwarves gather the dead and wounded. "Right," he breathed, glad they'd stayed out of sight. Then his eyes flicked to the slope where several discarded muskets lay half-buried, faint tendrils of smoke rising from their barrels. A greedy light sparked across his face. "Boss, they left those muskets behind." Shito followed his gaze. He grinned, yellow teeth flashing. "Let's go. While they're busy, we can grab some spoils." The greenskins dropped low and crept toward the canyon like foxes after chickens. In the falling snow, the weary sighs of the dwarves, the moans of the wounded, and the soft steps of the thieves merged and were carried off by the cold wind. 34. Spearmen and archers. Snowflakes drifted onto his face, cool and clean. Stone hunched forward and picked his way through the deep drifts toward the top of the canyon. Behind him came Crooked Mouth, Big Valley, and 5 goblins, eyes shining as they stared at the flintlocks stuck diagonally in the snow on the slope, the dark barrels still smoldering, looking far more fearsome than any stone spear. "Quiet. Don't snap any branches," Stone whispered, using his stone axe to push aside an obstructing bush. The dwarves and beastmen had just finished a bloody battle and were busy carrying the wounded and gathering the dead. No one had noticed the movement below the slope. He planned it out in his head, grab 2 flintlocks and run. Even if the dwarves noticed, they might not catch them. Crooked Mouth, the nimblest, went first, climbing hand and foot up the slope. He was only 2 steps from the nearest flintlock, close enough to brush the barrel with an outstretched hand. Stone's chest swelled with hope. He was about to tell him to hurry when a single gunshot cracked through the air. A lead bullet zipped past Stone's boots, startling up a spray of snow. "Damn it! We've been seen!" Stone's stomach dropped. He looked up and saw a red-bearded dwarf on the ridge, a flintlock in his hands, smoke still curling from the muzzle, eyes blazing with fury. Other dwarves on the slope had seen them too, seizing battle axes and weapons and shouting down the hill. "Greenskins, they're trying to steal our things. Shoot them. Don't let them get away." "Run!" Stone barked and dove into the trees. The goblins scattered after him, terrified. More shots rang out behind them. Bang, bang, bullets thudding into trunks and sending splinters flying. The little band plunged into the thick forest and didn't stop until the echoes of gunfire were only a distant memory. Only then did Stone allow himself to catch his breath. He leaned against a pine and glanced back at his companions. Crooked Mouth had lost his sheepskin hat. His hair was dusted white with snow. Big Valley's arm was cut by a branch and trickled blood. The others looked shaken and pale. "That dwarf's got sharp eyes," Stone muttered, frustrated. They had been so close. Through the gaps in the trees, he could see the dwarves on the slope, some digging pits, maybe to bury their dead, others gathering scattered weapons and armor into a heap. A few were pouring a liquid over the beastmen corpses, perhaps kerosene, preparing to burn them. "Looks like we get nothing today," Stone sighed. With the dwarves guarding the bodies, there would be no flintlocks to bring back, and probably not a scrap of fur either. But not all was lost. At least the beastmen had been driven off. They wouldn't be back to the howling forest for a while, which meant the Blackrock tribe could have a quiet winter. "Let's go. Back to the tribe," Stone said, shaking snow off his shoulders. "Don't linger. Watch your backs in case the dwarves follow." The goblins followed without argument, leaving a trail of deep footprints that the steady fall of snow soon covered. By the time they reached the tribe, night was closing in. Scarface was running the squigs at the bonfire, feeding more logs into the flames. When he saw Stone, he came squeaking over, holding a sizzling piece of roasted mutton. Stone accepted it gratefully and ate slowly, the tasty meat easing his anger. "Tell everyone to stay inside," he instructed Scarface between bites. "We keep to the tribe this winter and shore up the camp." For the next 2 weeks, the Blackrock tribe hustled and clattered. Big Valley, wearing his comical sheepskin hat, supervised the squigs as they plastered mud and reinforced the wooden frames of the new Goblin spearman camp and archer camp. Timber and stone piled up like small hills in the central clearing. The squigs hauled wood and rolled stones, their stubby legs churning as they hummed out-of-tune work songs. The goblins chipped stone and split planks with their axes. The steady clink-clank of tools rang from dawn to dusk. Stone checked the works every day. He watched the stone walls of the spearman camp grow stronger and the archer range take shape, and he felt proud. The system had told him that once those two camps were completed, he could train goblin spearmen and goblin archers. They were low-tier units in the wider world, but to the Blackrock tribe they were a huge step up. No more charging with broken spears. Those 2 weeks were peaceful. Snow fell without pause, blanketing the forest so thoroughly that even rabbits were rare. Food stores were stout. Smoked fish, dried mushrooms, and cured mutton filled the granary. The squigs ate hot mushroom soup every day, and the goblins had meat at every meal. The tribe grew fat and strong. On the last day of the second week, Big Valley came barreling over, breathless with excitement. "Boss, it's done! The camps are finished!" Stone followed him to the center of the tribe. 2 new buildings stood in the open space. The Goblin Spearman Camp was a square stone house of bluestone with a thick thatch roof. A wooden pole outside the entrance held a hanging beast hide. Next to it, the Goblin Archers Camp was a circular wooden shed with a tall, sloped roof. A wooden archery target stood nearby, the bullseye wrapped in red cloth and visible from across the clearing. "Good, good," Stone said, clapping Big Valley on the shoulder. Following the system prompt, he set a pile of dried mushrooms and a few strips of dried mutton by the entrance of each camp, training feed, and sent a group of goblins inside. A day later, the gates creaked open and a new line of troops came out. Leading them were 30 goblin spearmen. Each stood taller than an ordinary goblin by at least half a head. They wore tanned beast-hide armor and sheepskin hats and carried long spears, hardwood shafts tipped with gleaming iron blades. They formed 3 uneven ranks, but they stood proud and alert. Behind them marched 30 goblin archers, bundled in thick hide coats with wooden bows and quivers on their backs. Each quiver held 30 iron-headed arrows, reed shafts, iron tips, a few feathers stuck in. They peered around with curious, eager eyes. "They're stronger than us," Crooked Mouth breathed, leaning forward to take it all in. Stone grinned with quiet satisfaction. He picked up a spear, testing its weight. Solid, not too heavy, just right for a goblin. He plucked an iron arrow from a quiver and inspected the head. It was sharp and well fixed. "Good, very good," Stone announced. "From today, you are the spearmen and archers of the Blackrock tribe. The safety of the tribe will depend on you." No one spoke, but every goblin puffed up and gripped their weapons tighter. Stone looked at the 60 new elites before him. Excitement thrummed in his chest. This was his force, the tribe's defensive core. With them, a few wolves or a small rival band would be nothing. Even another beastman raiding party like the one before, he'd be willing to face them head-on. Snow dusted the spearmen's and archers' sheepskin hats like powdered sugar. The rest of the tribe gathered around, the squigs squeaking with admiration. The common goblins glanced on, rubbing their hands and wishing they too could wear hide armor and carry iron. Stone raised his stone axe and shouted to the sky, "Blackrock tribe, grow ever stronger." "Ooh! Blackrock tribe strong, boss strong." The shout shook loose a drift of snow from the branches, and it fluttered down across the clearing. Race, greenskin. Whack! Energy. Equipment, iron spear. Trait, racial trait, internal strife. Followers, loyal hound, Scarface Goblin 87, Squig 65. Stone watched his cheering people and then his new spearmen and archers, feeling secure for the first time in a long while. This winter, the Blackrock tribe would not live in fear. Come spring, he'd train more troops and build a blacksmith shop to forge iron weapons himself. He intended to make the Blackrock tribe the strongest greenskin tribe in the Howling Forest. Chapter 35, Orc Tribe. After the snowfall, the sky cleared. Sunlight filtered through bare branches, throwing dappled shadows across the Blackrock tribe's snow-blanketed ground. The camp hummed with activity. At the lumber yard, a dozen goblins swung stone axes. With loud cracks, the frozen trunks split under the blows, and pairs of squigs strained and dragged the wood back toward the tribe. The quarry was noisier still. More than 20 greenskins crowded around the stone pit, some smashing rock with hammers, others prying up slabs with chisels, the clanging echoing through the valley. 5 goblin spearmen stood posted nearby, spear tips angled toward the forest, watching for beasts. Shito stood on the steps of the boss's hut and felt a rare ease watching the organized bustle. Since the spearman camp and archer camp had been built and 60 elite troops trained, the tribe's security had improved. He'd split the spearmen and archers into 3 squads, one to guard the fence, one to patrol, and one rotating between the lumberyard and the quarry. Scarface kept the squigs in line. Apart from the occasional theft of dried mushrooms, they'd caused no trouble. Still, one worry gnawed at Shito: iron. If the greenskins wanted to get strong, they needed iron. Stone axes couldn't cut through metal armor, and wooden bows couldn't pierce hard plating. Only iron tools and weapons would make the tribe formidable. He'd sent many scouts out looking for ore. Crooked Mouth had taken the archers to scout the eastern valleys. Skinny Pole led the spearmen along the western rocky beaches. He'd even told Scarface's squigs to keep an eye out for rusty stones while they foraged mushrooms. 2 weeks had passed with nothing. No slag, no ore. Shito muttered curses under his breath and pulled a small scrap of iron from his pouch. He'd looted it from the giant wood tribe and polished it until it shone, but even that wouldn't mend a single stone axe. If they couldn't find ore soon, forget iron armor and spears. They wouldn't even have arrows enough for training. He was starting to numb to the frustration, thinking about searching the howling trail after spring, when hurried footsteps came from the distance. Shito looked up to see Big Valley barreling toward him, slipping and coughing on the snow. His green face was smeared with mud and powdery white. His sheepskin hat sat crooked. He was panting and wild-eyed. "Boss! Boss! Something happened!" Big Valley skidded to the bottom of the steps, hands on his knees, too out of breath to speak clearly. Shito frowned. "Why the shouting? Did the sky fall?" He braced for quarry collapse or a beast attack. His pulse spiked. Big Valley swallowed and forced the words out. "No, not the quarry. Near the quarry, there's a cave." "What about it?" "A boar in there," Shito asked, irritation rising. "Not a boar." Big Valley's eyes went wide. "A den. The goblin lads found a den. Inside, greenskins and orcs." "What?" The words hit Shito like a hammer. He leaped down the steps and grabbed Big Valley's arm. "Say that again. Orcs?" Orcs in a greenskin tribe changed everything. Goblins and Gretchen were cannon fodder. Only orcs could truly throw their weight around. One orc could cut through 10 goblins. A single orc boss could make a tribe as large as 3 or 4 Blackrock tribes combined. The quarry lay only 3 li from the camp. If the greenskins in that cave bolted out, the fence might not hold. "They're really orcs," Big Valley gasped, wincing under Shito's grip, but not struggling. The quarry lads went to gather stones and saw a hole in the cliff. One of them crawled in to look. "It's deep," he heard howling and ran out scared. He says he saw several greenskins and one much taller than the rest, greener than any goblin. Definitely an orc. Shito's mind raced. A tribe with orcs could be hundreds of goblins and dozens of orcs, or even a shaman. If they discovered Blackrock, the fence would be nothing against orc strength. Then he forced himself to calm. The other side didn't know about Blackrock yet. The quarry lad had escaped, which meant the den's inhabitants hadn't chased him. Maybe they hadn't realized the entrance was discovered. That meant opportunity. "Big Valley," Shito said, releasing him and lowering his voice. "Besides that quarry lad, who else knows?" Big Valley hesitated. "Just me and the lad. I was scared. I didn't tell anyone. I ran straight back to find you." "Good," Shito nodded. "Go back and keep that lad close. Don't let him speak to anyone. Send 2 quick-witted Gretchen to watch near the cave. If any greenskins come out, goblin or orc, capture them alive. If you can't capture them, knock them out. But under no circumstances alert whatever's inside." "Yes, boss." Big Valley nodded and turned back toward the quarry, his short legs churning through the snow until he vanished. "Wait," Shito called after him. "Tell everyone at the quarry to come back. Say the snowfall is too heavy and work's suspended. Don't let them near the cliff face." "Got it," Big Valley shouted, already running. Shito stood looking toward the quarry. Brow knotted. Cold wind bit at his neck, but his thoughts burned. Were the greenskins in that cave friend or foe? If they were friendly, maybe the tribes could merge. Then again, might made right among greenskins. If the other side had orcs, they might not take orders from a goblin boss. If they were enemies, they could destroy Blackrock if they struck first. Damn, he muttered. I need to find out first. He went into the boss's hut, where it was warmer. The tribe map lay spread on the meeting stone. He pointed to the quarry's location. Too close, like a ticking bomb, and weighed options. Send spies into the cave, reinforce the fence, and prepare for war. Try to lure the orcs out and pick them off one by one. He chewed a strip of roasted mutton and turned the problem over and over. Outside, the sun sank toward the west, and shadows stretched long across the snow. One by one, the greenskins from the lumber yard and quarry trooped back into camp, none of them aware of the secret 3 li away that might change Blackrock's fate. A light dusting of snow began again, the flakes whispering against the roof. Shito tightened his grip on the stone axe at his waist and stared out into the white. Whatever lived in that cave, he would not let the Blackrock tribe fall. A greenskin seizes his fate with his own hands. 36. Ratman 1 snow pellets tapped against the wooden window, making a faint crackling sound. Shitu sat beside the stone slab in the boss's hut, a rough map drawn in charcoal spread before him. The cave marked near the quarry stared back like a dark, hollow eye. He had been thinking about it all night. Greenskins weren't exactly born planners, but because this matter concerned the tribe's survival, he had stayed up until his eyes were bloodshot and finally hammered out a workable plan. Damn it, those sons of turtles in that cave haven't dared show their faces for ages. They must be scared of the dwarves. Shito jabbed his finger at the cave on the map, spit splattering onto the mark labeled Gezhik. Last time the dwarves and the beastmen fought in the canyon, the racket was huge. They couldn't have missed it, and the dwarves swept the howling forest clean this year. They're probably afraid of getting shot by a dwarf's firelock if they wander out, so they stayed holed up. He rubbed the stubble on his chin and sneered. If they're scared of the dwarves, we'll give them something else to worry about. If they dare send lads out to scout, Gobos or Gretchen, we'll gut them all and toss their chewed-up bones at the cave entrance. When they look out and see, hey, there are dwarves still milling about, they won't dare come out. That way we can get on with building things until our lads are strong enough to take on beastmen, then we circle back and deal with the rest. The plan was crude, but it fit greenskin logic. If a problem can be fixed with a fist, don't overthink it. Shito stood, stretched his stiff neck, and decided to lead the raid himself. The situation near the cave was unclear, and he didn't trust anyone else with it. Crooked Mouth, Big Valley, he roared. Crooked Mouth came running, iron spear in hand, his green skin still dusted with straw from sleep. Big Valley followed, his sheepskin hat crooked, clearly roused from bed. Boss, what's up? Crooked Mouth rubbed his eyes. Bring your archers, pick 10 lads with good aim. Shitu pointed at Crooked Mouth, then at Big Valley. You too, Big Valley. Lead 10 spearmen. Bring all your weapons. We're going to stake out the cave and deal with any greenskin that comes out. Got it! The 2 goblins perked up and ran out to fetch their forces, shouting as they gathered the men. The tribe buzzed into motion. Archers slung wooden bows and fitted quivers with iron arrows. Spearmen hefted iron-tipped spears, their beast-hide armor slick in the snow. Squigs gathered to watch, only dispersing after Scarface gave them a few kicks. Listen up! Shito stood at the front, his iron axe in hand. When we get there, keep quiet. Archers hide behind the trees first. Spearmen squat in the bushes. Wait for my signal before you do anything. Whoever screws this up won't get any meat when we get back. We know, the greenskins answered in unison, eyes bright with the prospect of a fight and a chance to steal what greenskin life was for. Shito nodded and waved them on. 20 goblins set off, cutting through the deep snow toward the quarry. Fresh powder quickly covered their footprints, leaving only a faint trail. No one spoke, only the scrape of spear tips against branches and the heavy breathing of the greenskins broke the white silence. After about half a li, the sound of hurried footsteps came from ahead. Shito signaled everyone to stop. Archers melted into the trees, knocking arrows and drawing bowstrings. The spearmen raised their long spears and watched the approach warily. Big Valley burst through the snow with 3 Gretchen trailing behind, all of them scrambling and slipping. Mud and dried blood smeared Big Valley's green skin. His hat was gone, and he panted like a hunted thing. Boss, but boss. He leaned over, hands on his knees, coughing. What are you panicking about? Chateau frowned. Did some lads show their faces? Good. Let the archers practice their aim. No, Big Valley snapped his head up, eyes wide and pale. That tribe, it's been wiped out. What? Chateau's hand nearly dropped his stone axe. Say that again. Wiped out? We haven't even made a move. The goblins behind him erupted. How can it be wiped out? You sure, lad? Crooked Mouth pushed forward, unconvinced. It really is wiped out. Big Valley swallowed and pointed toward the quarry. Didn't I send 3 goblin lads into the cave to keep watch? Last night, a horde of monsters poured out from deep inside. They looked like giant rats. Fur, red eyes, sharp teeth. There were tons of them, a black, surging mass. If we hadn't smelled something wrong and gotten out, we'd have been crushed too. He gasped and went on. That greenskin tribe was caught flat-footed. The lads in the cave said they first heard squeaking, then screams. Before long, it was all quiet. This morning I had the goblin lads sneak in. The cave was full of corpses. Greenskins gnawed down to the bone. That tribe, none of them survived. Chateau's face darkened, his brow folding so deep it might crush a mosquito. Rat-like monsters, and in great numbers? He remembered the system intelligence he'd seen before, Skaven. Those scum who lived underground loved to strike from the dark. They were as numerous as lice and vicious as hell. Damn it, Skaven, he muttered. A cold prick ran through him. He had thought the greenskins in the cave were the worst threat, but a Skaven nest was a different matter. Greenskins fought with blunt force. Skaven fought dirty, poisoning, ambushes, tunneling. They used every filthy trick. Boss, are we still going to the cave? Crooked Mouth asked, voice small. Greenskins weren't scared of a fair stand-up scrap, but things that lurked in the dark terrified them. Chateau was quiet a moment, then looked toward the snow-covered cave mouth. From outside it looked unremarkable, but who could have guessed a massacre had occurred within? Go. Why wouldn't we? He said, tightening his grip on the axe, a hard light in his eyes. We'll go see if those Skaven are still there. If they're gone, it's a perfect chance to grab some loot. Those greenskins had beastmen. They'll have iron gear. If they're still there, we retreat at once. Do not engage them head-on. The temptation of plunder outweighed fear. The greenskins exchanged grim nods. Stay sharp, Chateau ordered. Archers scout ahead. Spearmen follow. If anyone sees those rat ones, shout at once. Got it. They moved out again in silence, crouched low and scanning the trees. The snow swallowed most sounds. Only their footsteps, ragged breathing, and an occasional distant squeak, whether wind or something worse, reached them. Chateau walked in the middle, mind racing. If Skaven could wipe out a greenskin tribe that included beastmen, they weren't weak. Could they come out and run over Blackrock territory? If that happened, would the tribe's fence hold? He rested a hand on the iron axe at his back and looked at the archers, their quivers full, iron arrows glinting cold in the snowlight. No matter what, they had to find out what was in that cave first. A greenskin's life was always threatened by the tip of a blade. Snow rattled against his helmet. Stone stood at the mouth of the cave at the mountain's base, clutching the iron axe he'd taken from Kess, leader of the giant wood tribe. Its blade was polished to a cold gleam that reflected the falling snow. Behind him, 60 goblin spearmen and archers were formed in 2 lines. Their spear tips and arrowheads all pointed toward the cave entrance. 50 goblin lads with clubs and stones stamped and howled in the second rank. Beyond them, 150 squigs crouched in the snow, eyes bright, clutching sharpened sticks, ready to squeal and alert at the first sign of movement. The Skaven were a strange, terrible thing, horned rats made intelligent by warpstone, a corrupting mineral that mutates and corrupts. They worshipped the great horned rat and thought in schemes, plague, sabotage, secret machines, anything to spread underground and one day take the surface world. Once ordinary rats, the warpstone had made them clever. They built a hideous realm called Skavenblight and tunneled beneath the earth like a web. They had tried to make a doomsphere to shatter the planet's core, and it exploded instead, causing quakes and volcanoes that did as much harm to them as to the dwarves. After that disaster, they scattered and sunk into hiding, operating like an underground guerrilla force. Their highest council was the Council of 13, but the 13th seat was empty, meant to be a statue of the great horned rat, and the 13 always schemed and betrayed each other. Real power lay with the clan heads and the Grey Seers, rat priests who mixed sorcery with strategy. They never fought fair. They swarmed in endless numbers, sent plague, unleashed the Scryer clan's bizarre bombardments, or dispatched Eshin assassins to slit throats in the dark. They would stab allies in the back when it suited them. They had once tricked the vampire lord Nagash over a warpstone mine, only to betray him once his mine was emptied. They had fought the lizardmen and lost, returning to Skavenblight to be torn apart by their own. Cunning, inventive, often self-destructive, and fanatically devoted to their foul god, they quietly worked to turn the world into their nest. Don't be fooled. Where they gathered in enough numbers, they could succeed. Listen up, all of you. Stone's voice rolled through the icy valley. No shouting once we're inside. Spearmen take the lead. Archers, stay ready. Arrows notched. Goblin lads, you're in the rear. Anyone who runs wild gets cleaved by my axe. Awoo, the greenskins answered in one greedy chorus. Ever since Big Valley hinted that a greenskin tribe in the cave had been destroyed, everyone had imagined looted iron spears, axes, or even barrels of good ale left by orcs. Stone nodded and went in first. The entrance only let 2 goblins side by side. Inside, the cave widened into a natural limestone chamber hung with dense stalactites, its floor a crust of gravel and dirt. A damp, fishy stench hung in the air, like old blood and rotten wood. Big Valley shoveled forward and pointed left. He'd sent lads to scout that morning and had a rough idea where to go. They followed him deeper into the gloom, feeling their way along walls, bumping each other and letting out a chorus of curses. After a moment, the front opened into a huge cavern with a small skylight high above. Snowlight poured in like a pale column. If anything jumped down from above, it would be like soldiers falling from heaven. Stone halted, brows drawn tight. Before them lay the ruined remains of a greenskin tribe. Dozens of crooked huts and lean-tos stood. Many roofs collapsed, walls ripped with claw and bite marks. Rags, bones, and chipped stone spears littered the ground. Most chilling were several huge skeletons, orc skeletons with ribs gnawed clean, tusks broken from their skulls, empty black sockets staring. Crooked Mouth poked a skull with his spear. Damn, they were gnawed clean, he said. These marks, definitely rats. Stone knelt and picked up a bone scored with tiny, neat tooth marks. Rodent bites, all right. He scanned the clearing. The blood stains had blackened. Whatever had done this had left some time ago. Whatever value had once been here was long gone. No iron spears, no axes, just tattered rags and rocks. Good thing they're gone, he breathed. To have had an orc tribe chewed this clean meant the attackers had to be numerous, thousands, not mere dozens. The Blackrock tribe's 60 elite warriors would be crushed by that many. They'd picked a good time to be away. He kicked a rag and shouted to those behind him, "Spread out! Search everywhere. Wood, stone, rags, anything you can carry, take it." Awoo! The greenskins leapt into the ruins. Spearmen kicked open hut doors and jabbed into straw piles. Archers climbed half-collapsed roofs to peer under beams. Lads clawed through gravel and bone, flipping through the mess with wild glee. "Iron!" someone shouted, waving a rusty plate. A scramble followed, elbows and clubs swinging. Crooked Mouth found a battered chest in an intact hut and pried it open. Rotten straw and nothing else made him kick it over in a fury. Stone didn't bother with their brawling. Claiming loot was what greenskins did best. He worried instead that the Skaven might return through the skylight. Snowflakes still drifted down. If the rats chose that hole, they could drop in unseen. "Scarface!" he called. A short, squat gremlin squeezed through the crowd and scuttled up. Since joining Stone against the giant wood tribe, Scarface had been dubbed Loyal Dog by the system and had learned to follow complex orders and speak a few greenskin words. His voice was thin and nervous. "Boss, what is it?" "Take 5 spearmen and 5 archers and guard the skylight," Stone ordered, pointing up. "If you see rat things coming, shout and loose arrows." "Got it!" Scarface nodded and hustled to collect 10 warriors. They climbed onto a relatively intact roof beneath the skylight, spears at the ready, arrows notched, eyes fixed upwards. Stone moved into the largest hut, the chief's by its size. A tattered beast hide lay on the floor, riven with gnaw marks. In a corner, a stone jar held only black residue like wine crusts. A broken iron axe with a chewed handle hung on the wall. He scraped the jar's bottom with the axe blade. It tasted strong, greenskin liquor. Skaven didn't drink, otherwise even a stone jar would have been gnawed. A sudden commotion sounded outside, the usual mix of spears, clubs, and yelling as greenskins fought over scraps. Stone strode out and split a nearby wooden beam with his axe. It cracked loud enough to silence them. A lad held up a long beast tooth, stammering that it could be made into a weapon. Stone examined it, 1/2 foot long, thick, wickedly sharp. He held out his hand. The boy hesitated, then handed it over. "Stop it," Stone barked, brandishing the tooth. "What are you fighting for? The ruins are big enough for everyone. Anyone fights again, and I'll take every weapon." They scattered and resumed searching more calmly, showing finds and tucking them away instead of fighting over them. Stone went to the nearest orc skeleton. Its lower jawbone was missing, probably carried off by the rats. He fitted the beast tooth into the socket. It sat like a proper tusk. Huh? He had a goblin lad fetch a straight stick. With the iron axe, he whittled one end to a point and lashed the tooth on with a strip of rag. He tested the short spear. It felt good, sharper than a stone point. "Boss, look!" Crooked Mouth hauled a bulging cloth bag out from behind a hut and dumped it. Broken iron scraps, snapped wooden arrows, a few smooth stones tumbled out. Not much, but better than nothing. "Good," Stone said. "Bring it to the entrance." The others followed suit, carrying piles of broken wood, rags, iron shavings, and rocks to the cave mouth. The squigs scampered to help, legs a blur. Stone stood in the middle of the ruin and watched the busy little army, then looked up at the skylight. Snow still came down. Scarface and his 10 watched without sign of movement. He thumbed the beast-tooth spear in his sash and felt a little steadier. The Skaven were a threat, but for the moment they had withdrawn. "Enough," Stone called as the skylight dimmed with falling snow. "Tell everyone to pack up. We go back." "Awoo," the greenskins answered, gathering toward the cave mouth. They hadn't found the iron weapons or the barrels of booze they'd dreamed of, but a haul of scraps and a practice run in enemy territory was still a gain. Stone took one last look at the gnawed orc skeletons, then turned to lead his band out. The fishy smell had faded to a dull memory. Only footsteps and distant shouts filled the cave. This trip had been safe, but the danger wasn't gone. If the Blackrock tribe was to make a home in this forest, they'd have to keep their wits about them and watch the holes in the sky. 38. Rat Man 3. The cave was damp and cold. The greenskins, panting, shuffled toward the entrance, carrying the salvage they'd dragged out of the ruins. Chito walked in the middle of the group, fidgeting with a short spear made from a beast's tooth. Its tip gleamed faintly in the dim light. After rummaging through the wreckage for a long time, he hadn't found any proper iron spears or axes, but he had collected enough scrap iron and wood to keep the tribe's squigs busy for days. "Boss, it's stuffy in here. It's much brighter outside," Crooked Mouth complained, hoisting a bundle of tattered cloth. He sidled up to Chito, his green face smeared with ash like a dirty rag. Chito didn't answer. He quickened his pace. The cave had felt wrong the whole time they were inside. He'd had the prickling sensation of eyes on his back. He'd turned around several times and seen nothing but collapsed huts and scattered bones. "Maybe I was just being paranoid," he muttered, and shoved a goblin lad out of his path. They were only a few dozen steps from the mouth. Sunlight from the snowy ground outside streamed through the opening, painting a warm patch on the floor. Then a burst of high, dense squeals erupted from deep within the cave. The sound was sharp and grating, like countless rats screaming at once, and it crawled down the passage like a sickness. The greenskins froze. The salvage in their arms clattered to the ground, and they stared toward the noise, eyes wide. "Damn it, Skaven!" Chito's stomach dropped. He spun around. His earlier unease had been right. The vermin hadn't been entirely driven out. Panic erupted. The goblin spearmen raised their scrap iron shafts, but didn't know where to point them. The archers fumbled desperately to knock arrows, some dropping shafts they hadn't readied. The goblin lads were worse. Some tossed down their wooden clubs and crouched on the floor, hands over their heads, howling like children. The group compressed into a tight knot. Shito, who'd been in the center, was now shoved to the rear, blocked by panicking greenskins. He could barely move his feet. "Everyone stop! What are you panicking about?" Shito roared, shoving aside a trembling lad. The boy stumbled but didn't cry out, scrambling to the side. "Squigs, all of you, retreat! Fall back to the entrance!" At his shout, the 150 squigs that had been peering into the cave squeaked and bolted for the mouth. Their short legs churned furiously. Within moments, they'd piled into the snow outside and huddled together, none daring to run. "Goblin spearmen, step forward, form ranks," Shito barked again. At last, the 30 goblin spearmen pushed through the chaos, raising their rusty spears and forming 3 crooked rows down the passage. The line was clumsy. Some spear tips even pointed at friends, but at least it looked like a defense. "Archers, behind the spearmen, 10 paces back, knock arrows." 30 archers fell into place, drawing primitive bows. Iron-headed arrows were placed on strings, hands still shook, but now points were aimed into the dark. "Goblin lads, get the wooden planks we salvaged, block the front." Shito pointed to the ripped planks scattered about, the ones they'd meant to take for firewood. 50 goblin lads scrambled forward, hauling the boards and propping them upright with stones. Long and short, thick and thin, they shoved them together and threw up a rough wooden wall in front of the spearmen. It had gaps, but it would blunt the first wave. In just a few breaths, the chaos ordered itself. The spearmen crouched behind the makeshift barricade, spear tips jutting through the gaps like hedgehog quills. The archers stood behind them, bows drawn. The lads gripped clubs and crouched by the line. Their legs trembled, but none moved away. Shito stood at the flank, drawing breath. Giving commands had been as exhausting as a fight. He peered through the gaps at the passage's black throat. Shadows flickered deep within. The shrieking squeals grew closer, along with the scrape of claws on stone. The first Skaven reached the tunnel's mouth. It was about 4 feet tall, gaunt but with a swollen belly, fur gray-black and ragged burlap hanging off it. A sharpened bone club hung in its hand. Bloodshot eyes glared viciously. "Slave rat," Shito muttered. "Mindless fodder, just good for charging." Then more poured out. Slave rat after slave rat pressed forward like a black tide, eyes wild and weapons makeshift, bone clubs, rusty metal, bits of sharpened stone. Shito counted at a glance, over 200 visible, and shadows still flickering in the depths. Conservatively, 500 or 600 in total. Worse, behind the slave rat stood taller ratmen, dozens of clan rats, a full head taller, crude leather armor on them, holding short spears and scimitars. Their dark fur framed cunning, narrow eyes. Clan rat. Shito's face hardened. These were the backbone of the Skaven, a good deal smarter and meaner than the slave rat, directing the charge from the rear. No storm vermin appeared, thankfully, but 500 or 600 slave rat with dozens of clan rat was still a dangerous force. Shito licked his cracked lips and tightened his grip on his iron axe. The greenskins' line was set, but they were outnumbered. That didn't matter. Greenskins weren't scared of numbers. More enemies meant more fun. "Greenskins!" Shito lifted his axe and roared down the passage. "Let these rats know who runs this forest." He drew a breath and let out the raw, feral cry of the tribe. "Wah! Wah!" The war cry ignited them. The spearmen howled and braced. The archers' hands steadied, strings strained against iron shafts. Even the lads on the ground jumped up, eyes wild, clubs raised. The shout echoed through the cavern, drowning the squeaks and rattling the stalactites until droplets fell. The slave rat at the mouth recoiled for a moment, but the clan rat drove them forward with sharp cries and prods of short spears. The slave rat surged on again, weapons raised like a living wave. Shito fixed his gaze on the nearest slave rat and raised his iron axe. 39. Rat Man 4. Squeak, squeak, press forward! Press forward, all of you! A harsh roar echoed from deep in the cave, like fingernails scraping rusted metal, shrill, raw, and laced with the cruel edge of Skaven. Ja Ji, leader of the clan rat group, shouted from the very front of the formation. His deep brown fur was crusted with dried blood. He wore dark, grimy leather and gripped a bronze scimitar with a nicked edge, a spoil he'd taken years ago, raiding humans with the patriarch. Greed gleamed in his small eyes. When the patriarch had led the main force to wipe out this greenskin tribe yesterday, Jaji had lagged behind and only scraped together some bones. He had come back today with his slave rat and clan rat followers, hoping to pick up scraps. Maybe an iron spear the patriarch had missed, dried mushrooms hidden in a nest. Instead, they had stumbled into another greenskin group, a band already stripped of its best spoils. Jaji's anger swallowed his caution. Stealing from Skaven? An invitation to die. He bared his dagger-like teeth, and a savage smile flickered across his face. Perfect. Kill them all and haul them back as emergency rations. Food was scarce in winter. Greenskin meat was tough, but better than gnawing on rock. Squeak! Kill! Kill them! Drag them back, he screamed, waving his scimitar. Squeak! Squeak! 500 or 600 slave rat went berserk. They howled and surged like a black tide, brandishing bone clubs, rusted iron scraps, and sharpened stones. Those at the very front tripped over one another, pushing so hard they fell in heaps. The Skaven behind simply trampled them and kept going, heedless of who lived or died. Block them, all of you. Hold the line. Shito stood at the flank of the shield wall, roaring as he swung his iron axe. At the front, 50 goblin lads jammed themselves behind rough wooden boards. The boards groaned under the impact, some cracked. One lad slipped and stumbled back 2 steps, only to be shoved forward by the one beside him. Hold steady. If you fall, I'll bash your skull in, he snarled. As the slave rat slammed into the boards, the goblin spearmen behind shifted. 30 spearmen heaved their iron-tipped shafts through gaps in the planks with a single violent thrust. Spears finding bellies, throats, eyes. The slave rat at the very front had just raised his club when a spear pierced his throat. His squeak cut off, his eyes bugged as his limbs kicked futilely and then went still. Blood ran down the spear and dripped onto the snow, blooming a dark stain. One after another, the slave rat were skewered, some through the belly with intestines spilling out, some with brains splattered on the boards, others pinned to the ground by multiple spears with no strength left to struggle. Well done, Shito roared, hatred burning in his green eyes. Keep stabbing. Turn these rats into sieves. Behind the boards, 30 goblin archers were busy too. They drew and loosed. Iron arrows whipped through the passage toward the mass of Skaven. Crooked Mouth stood among them. His archery was the best of the greenskins. One arrow he loosed drove clean through a slave rat's left eye and out the right. The rat gave one squeak and collapsed. Ha! Got it! Crooked Mouth crowed, knocking another shaft. Other archers were less fortunate. Some arrows whistled wide and thudded into the rock. Some struck non-lethally, making the rats squeal and stumble. Others pierced a rat and kept going into the leg of a Skaven behind, felling 2 at once. Each volley sent a spray of bodies onto the snow. A dozen or more fell with every rain of arrows, but the Skaven numbers were overwhelming. 500 or 600 slave rat were packed into the narrow passage. When the front fell, those behind simply trampled over them and surged forward. It was like pouring water on a tub full of holes. The splashes were dramatic, but never enough to fill it. Damn, why are there so many of these rats? One archer muttered as his quiver ran dry. He cursed, scooped up a stone, and flung it into the crowd. Shito's face darkened. The pressure on the shield wall was mounting. The boards were taking more battering, gaps opening. Spearmen's arms were growing tired, their thrusts losing force. Quivers emptied, usable weapons dwindled. Squeak! Suddenly, a hulking slave rat squeezed through a crack and snapped at the hand of the goblin lad holding a board. The lad screamed as the board clattered down. Damn it! Another lad swung his club and cracked the rat's skull open. The creature dropped, twitching, but in that instant, 2 more rats wriggled through. One left, one right, and leapt for the exposed lad. Fill the gap, Shito bellowed. 2 lads scrambled, snatching up the fallen board and slamming it back in place. But the 2 Skaven that had already pushed through had locked jaws on the nearest spearman. One spearman shoved a rat off with his shaft. The other wasn't so lucky. Sharp fangs sliced through hide, and blood gushed from his leg. He howled and thrust wildly. The spear found a belly, but another rat lunged and bit his neck. Save him! Shito charged forward, axe raised, but only took 2 steps before the tight ranks in front stopped him. There was no room to advance. An arrow whistled and struck the rat clamped to the spearman in the head. Crooked Mouth had redirected his aim and saved the spearman's life. The spearman shoved the dead rat away and clutched his bleeding neck as he staggered back. Another goblin stepped forward and hoisted a board to plug the breach. "Don't panic. Nobody panic," Shito roared. "Spearmen, push. Archers, shoot the gaps. Lads, hold the boards." The greenskins obeyed. Spearmen drove their tips forward again, spearing the rats at the breach. Archers concentrated on the cracks, cutting down any rat trying to force through. The lads held the boards like their lives depended on it, because they did. Arms were swollen and raw from impact. Some hands bled where teeth had closed, yet no one dared let go. The narrow cave mouth only allowed 17 or 18 slave rat to attack at once, and the shield wall sat like a hard reef in the entrance, holding the tide. Still, the slaughter grew uglier by the second. Corpses of Skaven piled into a small hill before the boards. Some were trampled into pulp, organs and blood mixing into a sickening stew. Greenskins were no cleaner, streaked with both Skaven and goblin blood. One spearman's iron tip snapped. He tossed the shaft aside, grabbed a stone, and bashed a Skaven's skull. An archer's bow snapped. He seized a broken spear from the ground and jabbed through a gap. The lads fought with teeth and headbutt as much as with clubs. Even bitten and bleeding, they clung to the boards and would not yield. Here and there, goblins were ripped out and swallowed by the rat tide, their shrieks cut off quickly. New ranks filled the gaps, and the wall never suffered a total breach. The slave rats surged on, trampling bodies, climbing the pile to peer over the boards, only to be skewered or shot as they stuck their heads out. Blood trickled into rivulets on the passage floor, and each crunch underfoot made a wet, squelching sound. Eyes red with fury, the greenskins howled like cornered beasts with a single thought: kill these rats. Jaji watched from behind the horde, impatience sparking in his small eyes. He had expected the raid to be an easy grab. A single slave rat charge should have torn these greenskins apart. Hundreds of his kin had already been fed into the fight, and still the board-walled formation held. "Squeak! Rubbish! All of you are rubbish!" he roared at the clan rat nearest him, slashing the air with his scimitar. "You go! Tear the bones out of those greenskins!" Dozens of clan rat glanced at one another, fear flickering across their faces. The pile of slave rat corpses was a grim reminder of what awaited them. The spears and arrowheads glittered coldly. They had come for food, not for a suicidal charge. But they dared not disobey Jay. Reluctantly, they shuffled forward, spears and scimitars raised. Sunlight from the snowy ground outside slanted into the entrance, lighting the bloody scene. The greenskin shield wall looked like a reef soaked in gore, and the Skaven tide kept pounding against it. Every second cost a life. Every inch of earth was spattered red. Shito gripped his iron axe until his knuckles whitened. A Skaven claw had slashed his arm. Blood ran down into the crimson snow, but he felt no pain. Only one thought rang in his head: hold the line. This was the cruelest fight the Blackrock tribe had known since its founding. They would either slaughter these Skaven or be hauled away by them as emergency rations. No greenskin chose the latter. "Ow! Ow! Ow!" Shito let out a feral, furious roar that rolled back into the cave. The shield wall answered in kind, their voices shaking the rock. 40. Ratman 5. The stench of blood in the tunnel was thick and cloying. The slave rats' howls weakened, then rose again as they charged over the bodies of their comrades, only to smash again and again against the greenskins' shield wall. The Blackrock goblins stood like a red-hot bar of iron jammed into the cave mouth. Every impact simply left more rats mangled on the ground. A few slave rats slumped on the corpse pile, fangs bared, but none dared take another step. The cold glint of spear tips and arrowheads ahead made a second charge suicide. Jazi watched from behind the clan rats, anxiety almost spilling from his small beady eyes. He could see the slave rats' morale crumbling. They were useful in a rout, but the moment things evened out, they panicked. If this dragged on, he wouldn't only fail to drag the greenskins back as fresh meat, all the troops he'd brought would be wiped out. "Squeak, squeak! I've got it!" Jaji tilted his head and clicked his teeth. There were loose stones littering both sides of the tunnel. "Clan rats, grab stones, throw them, smash their rotten boards." He jabbed his bronze scimitar toward the shield wall. More than 20 clan rats launched into action. They kicked nearby slave rats, ordering them like a drill sergeant. Squeak, squeak, pick up stones, hurry. Kicked and yelping, some slave rats crouched and clawed at the rubble, scooping up handfuls and heaving them at the greenskin wall. The stones whistled through the tunnel. Some struck the wooden planks and split with a crack. Others slipped through gaps to bonk goblin heads. Ow! A goblin lad took one on the forehead. Blood ran into his eyes, and the board in his hands shivered. The lads beside him braced him upright. A spearman's ear took a glancing blow. Several archers were struck on the shoulders and couldn't hold their bows steady. But the cramped tunnel worked both ways. Many stones hit their own side. A slave rat that had just bent to pick up a rock was smacked in the skull by a fragment from behind and fell dead. Clan rats and a few clan rat commanders were struck on the back and yelped, though they forced themselves silent. Dirty rats! She too swore, his arm stung by a shard. Greenskins hated being dirtied by others. Only greenskins had the right to play foul. The anger lit him up. He raised his axe and banged the back of his weapon against a wooden board with a ringing clang. The sound tore through the tunnel. Bloodied and furious, the goblins snapped. Once the greenskins' wildness flared, madness followed. Trigger effect, fight to the death. Unless the boss dies, the lads will fight to the death. Wah! The goblin lad with the bleeding forehead swiped the blood away, pressed the board forward, and shoved a slave rat that was trying to squeeze through. The spearman, whose ear had been hit, let out a roar and drove his iron-tipped spear with lethal practiced thrusts. Archers abandoned bows and started picking up stones and throwing them back. Their aim was poor, but the force was brutal. Jaji's heart sank. This tribe wasn't like the one he'd seen fall yesterday. These greenskins had morale, simple tactics, and the hunger for death. If they kept fighting like this, he was finished. Squeak, squeak! Retreat! Fall back! Jaji spun to slip deeper into the cave. Survival came first, but a heavy clang cut through his plan. She too braced a board against his chest like a crude shield, shoved forward and smashed the slave rats in front of him. Bones popped, rats flew back into the milling mass, and the tunnel erupted into chaos. Greenskin lads, charge! She too bellowed. Mud and blood streaked his green skin. His eyes were twin coals. 50 goblin lads, pent up and feral, howled and surged forward with clubs and stone cudgels like a pack of rabid dogs. Spearmen, level your spears! Crooked Mouth shouted, and the 30 spearmen drove their iron-shod pikes forward in unison. Archers fell in behind, tossing stones at ratmen heads. The greenskins' formation flipped from defense to offense. The ratmen were stunned. They had been preparing a retreat, and now the greenskins exploded outward. Slave rats at the front tried to step back, but ratmen pressing from behind kept pushing. Bodies collided, and the column folded. Some slave rats were knocked down and trampled into pulp. Clan rats tried to shout orders, but were shoved off balance. Jaji's escape route jammed with panicking rats. He waved his bronze scimitar in a frenzy, but a falling corpse and a surge of slave rats kept blocking him. She too barreled through the press, bashing and swinging. One savage stroke cleaved a slave rat's neck, and the head bounced away, blood spouting like a fountain. Another cracked a clan rat's back and sent it down, where a club finished it. Dead rat, you won't run. She too smelled his quarry and raced toward Jaji. The ratman leader saw the chieftain's red-rimmed eyes and the reckless ferocity in his step and realized fleeing was impossible. Squeak! Stop him! Stop him! Jashi screamed. 2 clan rats lunged, short spears thrusting. Shito didn't dodge. He barreled into them with his board. One clan rat's chest caved. The other's spear found Shito's arm. Shito barely flinched and swung his axe, splitting that clan rat's head clean in two. In the next heartbeat, Shito was on top of Jaji. The ratman lashed out, scimitar flashing, a practiced cut that whistled through the air. It barely grazed Shito's neck. Shito seized Jaji's arm with his left hand and slammed the axe down with all his weight. Jaji tried to block. His claw was chopped off with a sick crack. Bone and blood clattered to the floor. He screamed and butted Shito's chest, knocking him back a step and reopening the wound in Shito's arm so it spurted even more. Shito held on. Die for me, he roared, and he brought the axe down again. The blade split Jaji's head from crown to chin, cleaving him in two. Black blood and brain matter splattered across Shito's face. The ratman's body twitched twice and fell silent. Boss is awesome! The lads who had poured through the breach howled and pounded their clubs. Without their leader, the clan rat's resolve snapped. Chiefs and soldiers alone, they began to break. Surrounded, the ratmen were cut down. Spear tips flashed like poisonous fangs as the spearmen stabbed at vital points. Lads circled and beat with clubs, claws, and fists. Archers and scavengers ran forward and started thrusting broken spears into ratmen bodies. One clan rat was speared through 3 times and dangled from the shafts like a torn sack. Another bit a goblin lad's throat, but was instantly skewered through the belly from behind. A few tried to flee deeper into the dark, but Shito hacked them down one by one. The greenskins paid with blood, too. A goblin lad was bitten in the throat and died. A spearman was tackled by slave rats and gnawed down to bones. Several archers fell with spears through them. The tunnel became a mound of carnage. Greenskin and rat, split, smashed, bitten to nothing, indistinguishable in the red sludge. After a long, heaving time, the slaughter ebbed. The remaining slave rats, seeing they were beaten, stampeded deeper into the cave, trampling over bodies and disappearing into the dark. The greenskins wanted to chase but were too spent and wounded to give pursuit. Shito leaned on his iron axe amid the heap of corpses, gasping. His arm had been pierced, his ribs ached, his face was plastered with blood and brains. A mask of a monster fresh from the blood pool. He was alive, though. He was still standing. Around him, exhausted lads collapsed to their knees, spat curses, or licked their wounds. At the snowy cave mouth, the squigs peered in cautiously. Finding no movement, they crept forward and poked the ratman corpses with sticks to make sure they were truly dead. Then a cold voice threaded into Shito's head. "Congratulations, host, on completing the campaign. Hard-won victory. System upgrading." Shito blinked, then grinned. He didn't know what the upgrade would bring, but he knew the Blackrock tribe had won. It was a bloody victory. Many lads were lost, but they had defended their ground. Greenskins lived by blood and war. He straightened slowly, eyes on the blackness deeper in the cave where some rats had fled, and who knew what other things lurked. As long as he stood, Blackrock would not fall. Snow still drifted. Dark clouds dimmed the sunlight at the entrance, and the tunnel sank back into pitch dark. Only the blood on the stones still glinted, catching the tired, fierce faces of the greenskins. "Wah!"